Hey everyone, welcome to GameFace, episode 348 on Sifted Games at sifted.net. I'm Shane Satterfield, and as I told you in last week's episode, we have a very special guest for this week's show, and that person is Adam Sessler. What's up, Adam?
I like the twinkle fingers. That's how I know I'm special.
That's right.
Is this?
Yeah.
It's not just hands. It's more like ragtime fingers.
Yeah, Adam, welcome to GameFace. It's been a long time since you've been on GameFace because you were on G4 and a bunch of stuff for a while. And you've left G4, and I just want to thank you for taking the time.
I don't know if I left G4. G4 decided to self-immolate.
Yeah, I don't think anybody had the choice of leaving G4. I think it just kind of happened.
Yeah.
But we're glad you're free now.
Not there.
Yeah, we're glad that you're free now. Thank you very much for taking the time to come on the show. Really appreciate it. Obviously, you and I worked together for a really long time on Tech TV and G4. I got a lot of love for you. Yeah. And just glad to that you managed to find some time to come on GameFace with us. What have you been up to, Adam? For the last
I have time to come on GameFace because all I have is time. It's funny. Right around the period that G4 kind of disappeared, I was actually kind of barely working for them at that point. I had sort of decided to wind down my level of participation. I was just going to be showing up for work once or twice a month. It would probably look differently with the number of videos.
Just to shoot raps and things like that.
It was less raps and then just doing my own segments. Okay. You know, it becomes something of a deconstructed X-Play, where there was less of a hosted show than segments of X-Play appearing on YouTube. So I would just be recording 4 or 5 of those. But yeah, right around that time, I think the last time I was on GameFace, I had started a company that was doing
Spike Trap.
Exactly, Spike Trap. It was machine learning driven technology to try to really kind of amass what people were saying about video games to better understand when anger was truly actionable and when it was just like kind of a tempest in the teapot.
Noise. Yeah.
Lo and behold, while I had left that company a while back, Reddit decided to buy it. And I suddenly found myself in a option to stop working. So I did.
Wow, that's awesome. Congratulations, Adam.
Thank you. Given the way that Reddit's behaving right now, I'm trying to keep a low profile because I don't want to think I helped make that happen.
When the sale went through, they were the good Reddit, right? So
they were the good Reddit. And most likely I had no party, other than signing documents. I had nothing to do with that deal. But Reddit does have, because of the way people write on it, probably some of the best material if you want to train up an AI system on how people talk.
Oh, that's actually true. That was a smart purchase for them, actually.
Yeah, that's and we were one of many, from what I gathered, of AI companies. So that's why I think it may have something to do with them not letting the third-party apps suddenly have access to what is something of a treasure trove in terms of just data, how people communicate. Yeah.
Well, congratulations on all your success, Mr. Sessler.
Oh yeah. So I can
think a few people more deserving, honestly. So.
Oh, thanks, man. That's I wish it for you as well. Was Sifted.
Yeah, so, I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. But I'm glad you decided to break out of your nothingness.
Yes.
Break out of your hodgepodge of nothingness to come and do the show. Yes. You are still playing games. You still love video games. And anybody like that is always welcome on GameFace. So, Adam, again, thank you very much for taking the time. I know doing a 2+ hour podcast is not something that most people sign up for when they're basically on vacation for the rest of their lives. So
no, it's like, oh yeah, because I have thoughts about games a lot, and they're not like panic thoughts about meeting a deadline. So this is perfect.
Well, this show will get you locked back in real quick. That's how GameFace works, man. You have no choice. Just the topics that we cover, it will get you right back into the groove. So we really appreciate you showing up, and this is going to be an awesome episode. I hope you guys are excited that Adam decided to make it, because you haven't really been on anything in like a year, right?
No. I kind of forswore. It was one of those, and you're different, Shane, because like you're my buddy. But there's always that I'm like it's always fun to do one, but then 10 other people suddenly have requests, lined up. And so
because
it's
they
like
think, oh, Adam's doing podcasts.
Exactly. So just for those watching, this might be the only one for a while.
Well, I'm glad that we're the ones who got you.
Yeah.
So you haven't been on GameFace for a while, but how we do things is we do housekeeping at the beginning of the show. We tackle a bunch of smaller stories, and we have a handful of them for today's episode. The first one we're going to talk about is something that maybe you agree with me on a little bit more than Matt does. I don't know, maybe not. But we found out this week that E3 is basically officially dead for good. The local authorities here in Los Angeles shared that they had canceled their reservations for 2024 and 2025, basically saying that either E3 isn't going to happen in LA or it's just dead. I tend to think it's probably dead given the happenings over the last 3 or 4 years. I am really upset that E3 has basically dissolved and it's going away. Matt doesn't really give a crap at all, which I'll be honest with you, Adam, I've been really surprised that he doesn't care. He really doesn't care at all. He has no nostalgia for E3 or anything. I do. I understand, the way the winds are blowing, that maybe it isn't ideal and they do need to pivot and change, but I just have so many amazing memories from E3 that it's almost hurtful to know that it's going away. How do you feel about it?
It's funny. I have vacillated on this topic probably for the last 5 years.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have.
Yeah, I think there's times where I'm like, yeah, let it die. Mm-hmm. It's over. Where there's also the one thing I do believe, and this goes back actually to the company I had and kind of looking at the data, is that sometimes you need to realize that people who are not the hardest hardcore gamers, but that kind of middle set, they really enjoy it. They would like to always be abreast of things, but they don't just kind of they don't make it kind of second to their job as the things they do.
Yeah, they don't listen to GameFace or watch GameFace.
right, exactly.
Yeah. They're cool with whatever they stumble across, basically, on social media.
Right, and they're more than happy to receive it when they find it. Mm-hmm. That group can't keep abreast of everything throughout the year, but what they can do is make plans in advance to pay close attention for a week of the year.
Yeah,
and so I don't think it necessarily E3 itself needs to exist, but the idea of a games week or something like that.
A time that they can set aside to make an appointment to engage with the industry.
For the industry to do it. I think E3 in its better incarnations was the best way to go about doing it. And, you and I can both describe to the young people what it really used to be like when there was an entire half pipe at the Activision booth and Tony Hawk was performing 3 of the 5 days that I believe E3 was going on for.
Yeah.
It's big, it's exciting. It costs a lot of money. I know where the companies are coming from. And I think it also...
Do you think the companies are being cheap though, Adam? Because you look at the financials, these companies are making more money than they've ever made.
Yeah.
They were okay with pinching into a much smaller budget back then to be a part of E3, and now all of a sudden they're like, you know what, we're going to keep that money.
No, I don't think they were being cheap. There's one company that I had worked with off and on, and the thinking about how they wanted to spend on the show floor was really old school thinking, was old Hollywood thinking, where it's kind of,
we'll bring in some celebrities. We'll bring in some booth babes.
But it's kind of trying to show up the other guys. It really is a certain type of measuring contest, or like the business card scene from American Psycho. And so a lot of money gets spent to very, very little impact. Back in the old days, when there was more than just GameStop and Walmart that were the retailers, and there were all these mom and pop retailers, it made sense because you were getting commitments to how many numbers of Final Fantasy VIII
buyers were there.
Yeah. And so you kind of wanted to have the booth babes and all this silliness to be able to get people into the booth and see if you could woo them. That whole purpose shifted to what was left of the press and I don't know who else was there.
Yeah,
they were there. I still don't know what they were doing.
A lot of GameStop retail employees.
A lot of Best
guess.
Buy floor managers, and things like that.
Which, hey, if I could go to E3 with that job, I would do it too. So,
and like because everything moved online, that's where the marketing went. It's. I get where Nintendo comes from, where Sony comes from, and Microsoft even, with these like just very internally produced videos. But
what did you think of the Xbox showcase? It was just like one video after another with the same bump in between. Done. World premiere. Play a video. Done. World premiere. Play a video.
If it's really good, it worked. So like that Spider-Man 2 demo, once I was seeing the Venom gameplay, I'm like, okay, I'm engaged because this is really visually dynamic. I can figure out how to play this game. But for a lot of stuff that isn't an established franchise, you can be really kind of like you're not having all those other parts of the narrative, hands-on gameplay, the developer coming out on stage to walk you through it, because I can't even think how many times I had seen a trailer and was like, well, it gives. And then upon further explanation going, oh, hold on, this is something that's really now gotten big on my radar. And that whole element has been short-circuited. I guess that's what streamers are supposed to become, except that's like herding cats.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
Or yeah.
Are you gonna miss E3?
I was never planning on going back down again.
Oh, really? You were never going to go back to E3?
G4, I was doing everything in my power not to work it.
So you don't miss it at all then? So you're like Matt.
I used to be so tired. I love doing it with G4 because we did such good work.
Yeah.
And it was like, it was kind of like
when it was over, it was very satisfying. Yeah.
It was very satisfying. The numbers had proven it out. I would say my great accomplishment professionally was convincing the powers that be at G4 to stop with the garbage and let's just do one game demo every 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's when we are the ratings for it. It became the bonanza for
remember
G4.
you, Matt and I, we fought for E3 live coverage for years and they thought we were crazy. And we're like, no, this is what's happening. This is the future. The live coverage, the live streams of E3, and they finally gave in and did it, and we hit our highest numbers ever.
Yeah, exactly.
We're like, and
that's so like I know that works and how satisfying it was, but
it's not like that
everyone
anymore.
started to do it. All of a sudden, resources to do it seem to be drying up. What I did to myself physically at when I was at Rev 3, where everyone thought I was on drugs, was a man who was getting no sleep, losing his voice. Also, it was so loud, but the mics were too good, you couldn't tell. So I'm also competing with something so loud I couldn't hear the person I was interviewing. And that just kind of broke my soul. And it's also, if E3 isn't at its best, it can be a painful sight. Those remaining years were sad. Yeah. And once EA kind of jettisoned and Sony was showing one game before they fully left, it started to have this this isn't a healthy industry. Like this, there was it was palpable anxiety. I wouldn't, if E3 came back and it was old school E3 and I could get a VIP pass and go down for the day, I'd do it. Yeah. But I don't know if that, whatever the hell it was in those last 5 years, I don't know if that's something that I could be terribly I think I would rather have it go away. I still think something's going to come back. I mean, it's just
I don't know, man. I kept saying that, but I really don't. At this point, I really don't think
if it'll be E3.
I mean, the other thing too. Let's be honest. The ESA has dropped the ball. It has had multiple chances to fix this problem, and it can't do it. So. Yeah. If it hasn't done it before and it's brought in all these consultants,
I don't think it's going to be the ESA. That's where I think the problem was.
Yeah.
And because the ESA cannot get these companies to play ball with each other. It's like the reason
they can't get Jeff Keighley to play ball with them.
Jeff Keighley clearly has it out for them.
Yeah. I don't know. He says he doesn't. And he's like, no, this just happened organically. It's like, do you believe that?
Yeah.
Or do you think it was all part of his plan?
Oh, yeah, I think it was his plan. I don't know this from a fact.
And look, I don't begrudge him. He's a businessman, so
yeah.
it's smart. If you sense weakness, it's smart to swoop in.
Full well, I've been on the receiving end of his machinations.
Yeah, that's true. I think a lot of people have, actually, that may not even realize it.
Yeah. So, it's. I don't know if the format that Summer Games Fest is works either. I think to neuter it of, I'm the guy who hates console war nonsense, but you need to have a little of that. Okay, if you show me mine, I'll show you yours.
Yeah, I mean, it gets people excited.
Goes on. So,
and with Sony doing his thing like weeks and weeks before, it's like you lose that. You don't get that, like, okay, Microsoft showed its stuff. Now Sony gets to answer with the retort. Like, that's all lost at E3. And I'm with you. Like, I hate console wars bullcrap. Like, it drives me bonkers. And I think it's one of the worst things in this industry, but it does generate excitement. And excitement gets other people involved who aren't into the console wars. So, to kind of go full circle to what you were talking about earlier with Spike Traps data and all that kind of stuff.
It's over. It's over as we know it. Something might return. I can't even imagine what that's going to be like.
Yep, it'll be interesting to see.
Goggles and cheese whiz.
Well, actually, maybe not that small. It's small for us because we live in North America. But another big story from this week was that Xbox has decided to raise its prices for its consoles in some territories, up about $50 in Europe. It went up like €100 to buy an Xbox Series X. Do you find it surprising that this is happening now? Because PlayStation increased the prices of PlayStation 5 months and months ago. And if I remember correctly, I think Phil Spencer said something to the effect of, we won't do that unless we absolutely have to. Do you feel like now that the supply chain issues and we're past the pandemic, do you think now is the time where you would need to increase the price of the console? What's your take on that?
I think we're so far into the life cycle of this generation, which I think is going to be a very long generation, that even if people haven't bought their console yet, people have hardened on which console they're eventually going to get. And so you might, like, it's probably going to hurt a little bit less. My other feeling, I can't remember how many explanations they gave for it. But this could also be kind of currency pressures that are happening. It's not so much supply chain, but
inflation.
Like
inflation. Because our inflation in America is like half of what it is everywhere else. Like our inflation is like 4%. In Europe, it's like 9%.
Yeah. And there's a point where it just, something's got to give. That's what I think is primarily behind it. But they kind of held off where it probably does less damage. Sony could have gotten away. Sony is such a strong brand in Europe. They could easily have done it for €50 more, which, bear in mind I think that's still like $75.
Yeah, I mean, they're outselling Xbox like 3-1 in Europe or something like that.
Yeah,
I mean, and with the UK like being the big blocker between the Activision Blizzard deal happening, you do wonder if it makes more financial sense for Xbox to just kind of leave that market. Like,
well, I think Microsoft might actually just up and be like, okay, fine. It's
later.
I mean, I think the UK was so absurd. I mean, their argument is just. I'm of the camp that believes that Jim Ryan could have very well handwritten most of their arguments against Microsoft.
It seemed like it,
yeah. But also, it's a little sad that in this post-Brexit, England, it's like you don't have the European weight to throw around anymore. Like as a market, it's not insignificant, but it can't be ignored until they get their crap together. The European Union, which did approve the merger, is a infinitely more important market. And the other thing to bear in mind with Microsoft is they do have all these other revenue sources when it comes to games. And they can, and I even was trying to say this back in the Xbox One era, that this wasn't the case then, but they could still be the number 2 console, but still be making more in revenue or potentially profits with the more expensive console that's in less homes, if you can get that attach rate for the console up. And obviously the Game Pass subscriptions is like this massive different revenue stream.
Yeah, like do they even care about selling consoles anymore? Like, does that even really matter? I feel like Microsoft would almost prefer to not sell consoles because chances are it's still probably losing money on each unit sold, which is why it's increased the price, would be my guess.
It's they don't want to be selling a console. I think the most telling thing I heard at that notorious Xbox One launch up at the Microsoft campus is I did my interview with Matt Booty, and he said this could be our last console. I knew he was kind of talking hot air, but I think
Packer's been saying that for like a couple years now, and people make fun of him for it. But
it's true. Investors hate hardware.
He's hearing it from people like Matt Booty. That's what people don't get. They're like, "Oh, Packer's crazy." It's like he's not making that up. Like he's hearing it from very important people, and that's where it's coming from. But he's not going to divulge his sources. Hardware. Yeah,
it's because you create inventory. That means stuff that is not becoming liquid fast enough. It's
just manufacturing.
It's a very difficult market. Yeah. So if you can cut, and this isn't just investors who are anti-game consoles. They didn't like the Surface tablet. Like there was almost a rebellion. It turns out Surface has turned to be far more successful than people expected, and the Xbox division turned out to be far more successful than people expected. Having said that, the profit margins change significantly the minute you take manufacturing out of it. So they're like, that's what xCloud is. Like that is going to be the solution that but they'll admit the internet infrastructure isn't there yet to be able to pull something like that off.
Well, they just announced $42 billion in like infrastructure for internet in the US yesterday. So maybe that helps a little bit, but I think still for people like us, the latency is always going to be an issue. The speed of light is only so fast. So
I just can't trust. I mean, anybody who went through 5 on live demos is never going to believe in xCloud.
That's hilarious. Moving on, but also staying in the Xbox camp. So because right now there are these hearings going on related to Microsoft acquiring Activision Blizzard, all these details are spilling out in the court documents and in some cases in testimony. One of the things that we learned is that a game that a lot of people are really excited for, particularly now with the movie just coming out, the new Indiana Jones game, which we got a teaser for and then we never saw again for like forever, as it turns out now that game is going to be an Xbox exclusive. This doesn't surprise me at all. Like, what's the point of these acquisitions if you're not going to have exclusive games? It's like people are shocked, like, oh, you want to take Call of Duty exclusive? Well, yeah, that's why we're going to spend $69 billion. Like, why else do you spend $69 billion on something? So it's like, I feel like a lot of people, it's just reality is starting to like slap them in the face a little bit now. And they're like, oh yeah, a lot of this stuff that Microsoft is paying for, they're going to keep for their fans. Like, no crap. That's how things work, right?
Yeah, it's what's also, I'm just going to say it because I can. The Sony ponies so remind me of like the religious right in this country.
Oh,
where it's like, you're the dominant like religion.
Yeah.
You laws are passed constantly in your favor.
Yeah.
And you still feel that you get to call yourself oppressed? No, it doesn't work that way. You still feel like
you're being cheated in some way. Yeah.
PlayStation has exclusives out the ass.
Well, one we're going to talk about today, Final Fantasy XVI, one of the biggest third-party exclusives like ever.
It's like, and the fact that the FTC or whatever the equivalent division is in the UK is entertaining this nonsense when clearly they're being their naivete to the game industry is being taken advantage of. The one thing I'll say is I actually happen to know a little bit about the judge that's hearing this case. It's being heard here in Northern California. My wife, who's an attorney, has appeared before this judge a lot, and she's spoken to me just of how much she respects her.
She respects the judge
deeply, and this is the kind of judge where you can't kind of
finagle.
Well, it's more feed them a more dumbed down and overly simplistic understanding of the games industry.
Right.
If you go back to the crazy Epic Apple lawsuit, where they spent, I think, like 2 days trying to figure out a definition of game, and whether or not Fortnite actually fit into something like that.
Right.
I think a lot of those
semantics
and those ways in which you can. I don't think things can get past her. That I have no idea what the judgment's going to be.
Which means that the acquisition's probably going to go through.
Oh yeah, because the FTC
let's be honest, it should go through.
the FTC's argument is garbage.
It really is. I don't understand how it's holding this whole thing up. It's crazy.
It's a very, oh my God, I'm going to sound like a Republican here, but it's a very activist FTC.
Yeah.
I believe the woman running it does have some ambitions of the Elizabeth Warren type. Mm-hmm. I just think, I'm not like
they're barking up the wrong tree on this one, man. They picked the wrong target.
Yeah,
that's all I think.
It was the right acquisition. No one wants Activision under Bobby Kotick. Someone needs to fix Blizzard. And the thing is I don't see it as acquiring content like this is not anti-competitive. You're not preventing other people from making competing content.
Like, what about record labels when they sign like the hottest band? Like, it's the whole thing is absurd, Adam. It's just absurd. It's crazy.
It's nuts.
And then kind of piggybacking on that, another story that kind of opened some eyes this week comes from another acquisition that actually went through with Bethesda. And obviously Starfield's about to come out. Everyone's really excited about Starfield. But now that it's about to launch, everyone's also at the same time kind of turning their eyes towards the Elder Scrolls 6, which would be the next big Bethesda game. And then we find out this week that the Elder Scrolls 6 is still at least 5 years away from being completed. It was announced like 6 years ago.
Oh, I remember.
That would be like 11 years from announcement. That's like Duke Nukem Forever levels there.
It's or even Fortnite.
Like, I'm wondering if I'm going to be alive when the game comes out. I mean, I'm not even exaggerating. Like, a lot can happen.
Where was this? Was this part of the hearing?
Yes, that information came out based because they were asking him, okay, what about Elder Scrolls? That series has always typically released on PlayStation consoles. Are you going to take that away? And their retort was, well, that's at least like 5.5 years away at least. It's like, and to court, they're like, oh, okay. But to us, we're like, what? Are you kidding me? It's like,
there's probably some massaging of the facts in court.
Yeah,
the one other thing is that announcement of Elder Scrolls 6, I never regarded as an announcement. It confirmed what was blitheringly obvious to anybody. I believe Elder Scrolls 6, that video was to create an acquisition for Bethesda.
Probably.
It was
it was a fishing expedition. Yeah.
And obviously they needed to do it if they were going to announce Starfield.
So Adam, my next question to you though is, have games just become too freaking big? Like, for example, I'm playing Final Fantasy XVI right now, and we'll get to that. I'm like 30 hours in, and like, I just got like a new gameplay mechanic, and I just got like the ability to ride a chocobo for a mount. And like, a lot of the people complaining about Final Fantasy 16 are like, the first 2/3 are amazing, and then the last third, it falls apart. I haven't even got to the last third yet because it's like a 60-hour game. Like,
sounds like the opposite of 13, which was, I remember Rob Manuel wrote the review and goes, gets really good after 60 hours.
It's like,
and I told him if I ever see that in a review for the rest of my life, I'll set him on fire.
But that's what I'm getting at. So like Matt and I in last week's episode, we started talking about how both of us have had to make hard decisions on games to delete from our hard drives as these new games are coming out. And there was like Matt said that he doesn't think now that he'll ever finish God of War Ragnarok. He deleted it off the hard drive. He had to. And he's like, I'll probably never download it again. Am I going to go download another 80 gig game? Or some of these games are 150 gigs. Do games need to be like this long? Like, I don't know if it's like age or I'm getting older, but like, I'll be honest with you, like, I'm kind of cool with a game that's like 35 hours. Like, I would gladly spend $70 for a 35-hour game. Like, do we need these 10-year, 6-year development cycles anymore?
No. I mean, the simple answer is no, but we better get used to them. It really is going to come down to we're going to have to stop looking at games like movies, where in theory, say you're a film critic for the New York Times or the New Yorker, you're like, I bet I can see 75 to 80% of the movies in a year. Whereas this is now more like Russian novels, where it's like, you're going to have to pick the 30% you're going to read.
Like, can you think of any game that you hit the 40-hour mark and then it hit its stride? Not very many.
No.
Usually at that point, you're like, oh, God, here we go. Like, I'm just trying to get through this.
The one caveat I have is I'm playing games differently now.
Okay.
And only play a game. I'm playing games maybe 3-4 hours a day because I'm trying to balance my games. I like to watch a movie a day. I like to read 100 pages a day. And because I'm a house husband now, I cook dinner every night. And I enjoy. It's like I'm playing games in a single session, not to the point where I'm exhausted, but to the point where I probably could keep on playing. I just choose to do something else. And I'm able to, like, I'm still enjoying Zelda immensely. Like last night was like the first time I really started exploring underground. And I'm like, oh, like the map doubles down here.
Oh yeah, it's like almost the size of the whole
exciting,
game. Yeah.
But I'm like, oh my God. But I'm also thinking through in my head that I just want to finish Zelda and Diablo by the first week of September so I can play Starfield. And I'm like, Starfield and probably one other game, Spider-Man 2. Yeah. For the rest of the year. And then
that'll get you through the whole year.
Yeah. And then maybe if it, I'll actually, I played every one, but I don't know when I play Assassin's Creed.
Yeah. Plus, Mirage to me isn't looking great anyway. So
I keep on forgetting that they showed it at one of the.
I was really disappointed in what they showed. Honestly,
I keep on forgetting it's coming out. Or
that
I
think a lot of people feel that way. Yeah.
Well, that's Ubisoft. They reap what they sow.
So you're actually saying that you're cool with these gigantic games?
I'm not saying I'm cool, but it's also what's going to happen. See, the reason why I think we're not going to have. I think there's a good chance we're not going to see Elder Scrolls for 5 years is that Microsoft has ambitions with Starfield they really haven't explained.
Yeah.
It's
gigantic. So look, when your head of marketing and PR claims that your game might be too large, maybe that's where you're starting to get to the area of maybe where the ambitions are too much. I don't know. Like, it sounds like they've been working on Starfield for like 8 or 9 years at this point. Like, I don't know.
I mean, I think they've been, how long they've been working on Starfield?
People complain if it's 40 hours instead of 80. Like, I just struggle to think that people would. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think, well, it's a great one for Game Pass. They want a forever game. And the stories I've heard is that Starfield could have launched last year. But all the stuff that might have come as DLC, stuff that have been cut from the process, to be able to make that date, Microsoft said, you know what, put it back in, we'll push it for a year. Because they want something so big that it becomes it makes Game Pass sticky to and I think that I wouldn't be surprised if things happen to that game over time, that does it allow for kind of like that Fortnite style events happening inside of the game world.
Do you think that's going to happen in Starfield?
This is me theorizing. This is not based upon, but I think that if they are saying that Elder Scrolls isn't for 6 years out, they do not want to have a downtime where there is not a Todd Howard Bethesda style game that is like, that there's a reason to stick with Game Pass because there's always another reason to go back into Starfield.
Todd Howard, by the way, hinting that, Elder Scrolls 6 may be his last game. I mean, that's the other thing too. Do you feel like
he's our age?
I know.
I'm not surprised.
Do you feel like some of these auteurs are maybe selling their career short by making these games that last this long and take them 10 years to make instead of making a game every 3 or 4 years?
I think that I think one of the reasons that these games are taking so long is less the auteur like wanting it to meet their vision than the heart attack of a 3-year dev cycle.
Yeah,
that like some of those horror stories.
Yeah,
and I've become a year. Yeah, it's like that's a really rough schedule but that's the problem. People somehow we created this way of thinking in the mind of the consumer that it's bang for buck. Well, that's a great way to spend your $60. Well, no, a good game is a great way to spend your $60, regardless of the length of it. That it's going to take some pretty serious re-education of the player out there. Because also I'm of the mind that I think they should be selling games like Starfield at $120 because I mean just think about how much
I know
work
the investment
is going
there
into it.
Yeah,
and obviously no one wants to hear of it, but like games are expensive because they are expensive,
right, to make.
Yeah. So
yep, that's how finance works.
yeah, it's a real simple. You don't have to understand like John Maynard Keynes to
Money
understand
out,
the economics of that.
money in. It's that simple, really. So you're basically saying that you don't think the games are getting too big then?
No,
you think it's just the way the market's
there
going?
There are many games that are unnecessarily large.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the thing is that erring on the side of big has become the mentality.
Because they're the ones that sell 15, 20 million
shorter
units.
Games. I would love shorter story. I would love older Naughty Dog, like Uncharted 2. I still think was almost a little too long.
Uncharted, I think it becomes more difficult to tell a great story the longer the game is as well. It's like, because like even writing a great film that's like 2 hours long, you have to be a genius to do that. Imagine trying to write something that sustains for 80 hours. It's almost unrealistic. Like, I feel like some of these developers are just setting themselves up for failure in some cases by following this template. But it does seem to be a more recent phenomena that these just generally the really quadruple A games, as some people call them, they tend to be 60, 80 hours long anymore.
And we can all thank Rockstar for that, because they made people realize you can make $1 billion in 3 days with this massive open world game. No one seems to understand that Rockstar has something that no one else has. It's just,
it does. Still, to this day, it does.
Yeah.
Another smaller story from this week is that there is a Death Stranding film in production right now. And I'll say this too. Kojima recently has been showing some contrition. Like, I feel like he is becoming self-aware of his celebrity a little bit.
You make it sound like Skynet.
Seriously, I felt like he had a lot of hubris for a lot of his career.
Yes,
I do feel like now he's starting to change a little bit. So a documentary just released about him, and it is literally, I don't know if you've watched it or not, but you can just tell it was made by like ultra Metal Gear Kojima fanboy.
Yeah.
And after Kojima watched the final version of it, even he was like, this is a little, I don't know. He was basically saying like it's a little egregious in making me look like a superstar. But in the same week, he announced that they're working on the Death Stranding movie, and he shared that he will be heavily involved in creating the Death Stranding film. Which, let's be honest, isn't this what he's wanted all along? Is to make films.
Yeah. I mean,
I feel like he used game development as a Trojan horse to actually make films.
Matt and I have talked about this at length, that he has always come across as a frustrated filmmaker with great game ideas.
Yeah.
Do
you think the Death Stranding movie is going to be good if he's heavily involved in it?
You know what? I mean, good is almost an irrelevant element. If someone's going to try to adapt Kojima, might as well be Kojima himself.
Yeah.
It'll be very interesting. It might be a little illuminating it might answer some questions for me. Like, there's just things that I
think it'll be better as a film than it was as a game. I felt like Death Stranding was a film that they tried to shove a game into, and they're like, "What can we do with this?" Oh, well, we'll just deliver stuff. Like,
I really like Death Stranding.
Oh, you did?
It's weird. Look. If I cannot point to what I liked about it. I played it during the pandemic. It was during this period of time during the pandemic when I had left the tech company. I knew I was going to be working for G4, but they had nothing for me to do. So I was just kind of like, there was no stress and nothing to do. So I'm like, screw it. I got time. I'm going to play Death Stranding.
Yeah.
And I just kind of got lost in I'm wandering around this world trying to just piece together like little things about it. That's not, so it was an interactive experience more than I would call it a game.
Yeah.
And I don't
but
know
a compelling one in a lot of ways.
The one thing I just can't figure out is if a movie could even come close to the sense of loneliness that game had, because that's a game where you have to play it for 60 hours to kind of get this wow.
Do you want
nothing
a
is going
film
to change
that
here?
is like loneliness for 2 hours?
Yeah,
that's
see,
the question. Like, I don't know if film goers want to sit down for 2 hours and watch somebody be lonely.
I will watch it during my whole Adam Sessler movie campaign. I mean, I watched some messed up things that fall well short of pleasure.
Yeah.
And so I enjoy things like that. But as an expensive commercial venture, the only way this is happening is Kojima's probably financing it.
Yeah, that'd be my guess too.
Yeah, this was the same case. That horrible Assassin's Creed movie. It was a notorious thing in Hollywood because Ubisoft got final sign off on the movie, and like that never happens unless you're paying for the entire movie.
Yeah, it's true.
So like the studio was more or less like renting or leasing out their equipment, their sound stages, and their distribution mechanics. Yeah,
that's
Ubisoft.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
Our final topic for housekeeping for this episode also kind of goes back to the whole court cases happening right now with Microsoft and the Activision Blizzard acquisition. It basically slipped out. I think it was yesterday or the day before. Microsoft shared that it believes the next console cycle will start in 2028. That seems like a long time from now. I mean, that's still 5 years from now. These consoles are 3 years old, 4 years old, 3 years old.
The 360 lasted longer than any of us imagined.
Yeah, but I mean, they do typically. Like the PS4 now is what, like 8 years old, I guess.
Yeah,
but the other console's been out for 3 years now. So,
well, except I don't think 2 of those years count.
Because of the
supply issues in the pandemic.
Yeah,
that it didn't really start to become even like that much of a choice for people until they could buy it easily.
That's true. Yeah, and still, also, in some cases, they're hard to find. So
I'm trying to think what the technological push would be, because AK, if it even happens, is so far down.
It just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You need a TV the size of your wall for 8K to matter.
Exactly.
It's never going to matter.
Maybe. There's, although the AI that everyone is so like about right now is not the AI that would actually be in a game. But maybe that's where the technological push is. But there's so many ways you could utilize other things to do the computation. I mean, like as we were talking about earlier, it sucks to go short circuit your market by announcing a new console and then trying to get that console to market, then trying to have games that will actually work on that console that make a good case for people buying that console. Neither Sony nor Nintendo nor Microsoft ever want to put out another console. And the only one that really needs to right now is Nintendo. God, they need to.
Yeah, they really.
I would like to play a Zelda on my television that doesn't look like an N64 Vaseline smear ass job.
Yeah, or it bottoms out at like 8 frames per second sometimes.
It's just incredible, and in scenes where it shouldn't be doing that.
Only Nintendo could release a game like that and come out not worse for the wear.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, think about the review scores for that game that goes to like single digit frame rates at times. No other franchise, no other publisher could get away with that.
We'll probably be talking about my thoughts on that.
We will. Yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah, later on in the show for sure. So you think 2028 actually makes sense? I do too, honestly. I think we've really reached the law of diminishing returns. Like, if you were to buy a console in 2 years, a new one, you would spend $500 or $600, and it would be really hard to see the improvements in games.
Ideally, what you're going to buy in 2028 doesn't process in the home. That you're getting something that's more akin to an Apple TV box, and you're going to be doing a lot of cloud processing. I mean,
I think a lot of people would be very, very angry if that were the case, even in 2028.
I would not be surprised if they put out a super expensive hardware version, or they're like, it's the same. You now can get the same performance out of the Xbox Series X. With through the cloud streaming. I mean, that's their goal.
Particularly with Microsoft, for sure.
My biggest concern is really more. It's less whether or not Microsoft and Sony can handle it. It's whether or not we're going to have the internet infrastructure. I mean, I think America's poor investment in that infrastructure is going to bite us in the ass one of these days. And games always tend to be at that pressure point, and they feel it first. And
Yeah, they're always on the crest of the wave when technology is concerned. So, yeah, to me, I think 2028 actually does make sense. I think a lot of people may not want to hear that because I think some people are disappointed in PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X because, we were supposed to get ray tracing and most games can't run ray tracing on these machines. I mean, that was the big catchphrase before these machines came out, especially with PlayStation 5 was ray tracing, ray tracing, ray tracing.
And shame on the industry for making a big deal. I mean, it's cool. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Does it really change the experience of my game playing? I'm old. I have to wear glasses when I play.
Do I need to see the reflections in the puddles on the ground?
Yeah, it's neat, but and no developer outside of the art department, no developer builds a game around ray tracing.
No one's like, you can see the reflection in the mirror, and then you can see the enemies coming up behind you. Like nobody designs games that way.
I've always told the industry to stop pushing numbers with new consoles, but a marketing department, if you've ever met a marketing department, they can only function.
That's all they care about is numbers. Yeah. That's what, and they're going to, in 2028, they will sell consoles based on the numbers. I guarantee it. Yeah. And if they're smart, they'll probably stop talking about ray tracing, although finally those consoles will probably be able to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
After we waited like another 8 years for ray tracing on consoles. So, all right, well, that's it for our housekeeping today, and we're about to get into the bulk of the show. But before we do that, here's a word from our sponsor. LS Cream is a fine cream liqueur created by fellow gamer and sifter Stevens Charles. It's inspired by an ancestral recipe from Haiti called Cray Mass, and a double gold winner for its original taste at the New York Wine and Spirit International Competition. LS Cream can be enjoyed on the rocks or as a mixer for drinks with its rich blend of fresh cream and neutral grain spirits with notes of coconut, vanilla, cinnamon, and nutmeg. It's great in coffee or to make espresso martinis. To learn more, discover amazing drink recipes, or to track down your own bottle using a handy store locator, head to creamls.com/sifted. That's creamls.com/sifted. All right, a big thanks from LS Cream, our sponsor for GameFace. As the ad says, if you want to learn more about it, go to creamls.com/sifted. There are drink recipes there. There's the history of the liqueur. There's links there where you can go and buy it online. There's resources that can tell you where you can buy it locally. And Adam, my question to you is, do you like Bailey's Irish Cream? Do you use it at all in drinks?
Well, I actually stopped drinking, believe it or not.
Really? Everything?
Yeah, can you believe it? Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. I didn't know that.
I suddenly felt like I have a reason to live now.
That's hilarious. I'll be honest with you, Adam, I just don't drink that much anymore. It's like socially, I don't go out to bars and clubs that much anymore, and that's where I would drink. And since I don't do that, like I just don't drink that much.
I was the person who was trying to ignore the pains of the world through
I never did it for that.
Veneer. So
but I will say this, LS Cream, because obviously we have a sponsor and they've been giving us the product, I have started drinking again because of LS Cream. I've started mixing up drinks, and it is kind of like the new competitor for Bailey's Irish Cream, and I like it better than Bailey's. So
see, I typically don't lean towards stuff that's on the sweeter side. Bailey's was like that style, like that it's got that bite from the whiskey and a little bit of the menthe, or I guess it's just the mint. So yeah, this would be something that I probably hit you up for a case of.
Okay. Well, I've really enjoyed it. And the other thing too is that it's a liqueur. So it's not really strong. So you can mix it. You can mix it in with a bunch of different stuff and it tastes amazing. And then you're not really drunk. It just kind of takes the edge off of things a little bit. I love it. It's great. For me personally, the point of life that I'm at right now, I love LS Cream, and you guys should too. Again, go to creamls.com/sifted and pick up a bottle. And with that, Adam, it's time to get into the bulk.
All right.
Of GameFace 348. We're going to kick things off talking about undoubtedly the biggest game release of the week, Final Fantasy XVI. We mentioned it in the housekeeping as a gigantic exclusive for PlayStation, a gigantic third-party exclusive for PlayStation, which, let's be honest, Adam, that just doesn't happen very often anymore.
Not as much anymore, no.
I mean, it's smart. I mean, I think for most games, it's a better idea to release them multi-platform, because the other part too is if you have any sort of online components in your games, you kind of need it to be on the other platforms to make sure you always have a healthy player base for matchmaking and things like that with crossplay now. Obviously, Final Fantasy XVI, no multiplayer at all. It's completely single player, so it makes more sense for it to be a PS5 exclusive. Now, the truth be told, the PC version of the game, they just started working on that. And whenever they get that done, it will come out for PC. My guess is there's probably a year's exclusivity that PlayStation.
That's what it sounds like. And actually, to be honest, during testimony, it might have been today. I caught this from Stephen Totillo, so credit where credit's due.
Yep.
When asked about Final Fantasy XVI, Phil Spencer used a slightly different terminology that, once again, it actually may be an exclusive window on Sony, and it will show up on Microsoft. They can't even mention it can happen. So that's, I can't remember exactly what the phrasing was, but it wasn't as emphatically, it will never show up on Xbox.
I think people assume that eventually it will.
If it can work on Windows, it can work on Xbox.
Yeah, so very
easily.
That's
how I see it.
Yeah, and I also see it like Square Enix is not going to leave all those sales on the table either, because this is a big investment. This is another game that was in development for way over 5 years. I mean, it's been a long time since Final Fantasy 15 at this point.
Remember when Square was the one company that did take 5 years to make games? Now everyone does?
Now everyone does it, yeah. And the funny part is that Square has managed to not really find success doing that so far. Square Enix has really had kind of been in a tough row here over the last few years, struggling to find hits. I think Final Fantasy 16 is going to be one. However, pre-sales for it were low compared to Final Fantasy 15. Also, sales in the UK so far are like a third of Final Fantasy 15.
Well, I mean, there's Zelda and Diablo. Like those two games fit.
They're taking up lots of people's time for sure.
Yeah, and they're not small games by any stretch of the imagination. Obviously, as most people who know me already know, I don't, as a matter of course, play Final Fantasy games.
Adam, I do not typically either. And Matt's not a big fan of Final Fantasy either. Like we're one show where like the Final Fantasy fanboys do not like GameFace all that much.
Yeah.
Like, when we post like the archives on YouTube a few days later, like we get a lot of people that are like, like we make fun of the grunting in the games, and people hate that we make fun of that. Like it's really funny, but. Anyway, to me, this is a Final Fantasy that I've waited forever for. To me, it's like it's a Final Fantasy that I played when I was like a teenager or whatever.
Really?
It's like straight up fantasy. It's not this weird, goofy, like androgynous, like people dressed.
Like the cyber, like dragons and cars and lasers.
Yeah, it's just dark fantasy. And
interesting.
I'm surprised you didn't know this.
I like when I see Final Fantasy on the unlike the Sony what are they called? I just leave the room. Even when I'm working, because there's 5 people that know more about it than I ever will.
Yeah.
But the one thing I have picked up on is this is way more of an action game than a more traditional. So that's why I was so surprised when you said it was like old Final Fantasy, that I keep on hearing about how the combat has changed.
Well, the combat
significantly.
It has. So the combat was handled by the guy who used to do combat for Devil May Cry, and you can see it. It's literally like playing Devil May Cry with a Final Fantasy setting. And some fans are upset that it's not a turn-based, but let's be honest, even Final Fantasy games haven't been turn-based for a really long time. They have this weird like half step between action combat and turn-based, and they'll always like include this almost like a caveat in the gameplay for the old fans that want it to be turn-based to make them at least feel like they still care about them.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, action-based combat is the future of Final Fantasy.
So like those previous games were like the methadone treatment to wean people off it to finally be clean, which is now Final Fantasy 16. Yeah.
And so we talked about this last week, but Matt and I had only played the free demo that was available. And the free demo is 2 hours long. And I'll be honest with you, Adam, those are some of the best 2 hours of video game that I have played in probably the last half decade.
Wow.
Literally mind-blowingly awesome. Both Matt and I were like taken aback and shocked. We were like, what? This is a Final Fantasy game? Now I've spent around 30 hours with the game. And I will say this, my impressions of it have changed in that amount of time. I am no longer over the moon over the game. I still think it's great. And I think it's the exact direction that Final Fantasy needs to go. but I have discovered some issues now that I've spent more time playing it.
Are the first 2 hours in that demo, are they indicative of what the game is like, though?
Yes, absolutely. As far as how it plays and it sets up the plot, but it literally, one thing I will say is this game, you can tell whoever wrote it and designed it, they're huge fans of Game of Thrones. So the first 2 hours is literally like one of the most awesome Game of Thrones episodes you've ever watched. I'm not exaggerating. Like,
wow,
I know
it's just not what I expected.
It's hard to.
Wow.
I know. I sat there. I was like, I cannot believe this is a Final Fantasy game. It goes through these crazy arcs in 2 hours, and like they kill off like everybody, like every people that you thought were sacred and were going to be a part of the story for the rest of the game. They are just killed. Like. And it blew me away. I was like, oh my God, this is Game of the Year contender. And now that I've played the actual game, some cracks have started to show. Like you can see some things where they've spackled over some issues in that 2 hour demo. And I'll say this, Square Enix was really smart to release that 2 hour demo. Because the other thing is that your save also carries over to the final game.
That's such a good idea.
Matt and I always say every demo should do that. Like if you can't do that, just don't bother releasing a demo.
Yeah.
But this game does that. And so you do pick up right away, but it doesn't keep that momentum through, unlike Game of Thrones. It fails to keep that momentum as the game continues on. It does kind of settle into a groove after a while, and it does also kind of repeal some of the things that happened in that first 2 hours. That
in terms of narrative, not gameplay.
Narrative. And gameplay. Okay. Because when you first start playing it, the combat, you're like, oh my God, this is Devil May Cry level combat. But the more I played it, the more I realized that it's really just mash square to win.
Oh, bummer.
So people just aren't upset that it's not turn-based. They're also upset that there aren't as many RPG elements. And it is like RPG light. So you have a sword, and then you have 2 pieces of armor, and then you have 3 rings that you can equip. And that's it. And the 3 pieces of armor don't change all that often. And once I figured out the rings to use, I never changed the rings either, because you get rings that like will automatically evade for you. You get rings that will automatically pull off your best moves as soon as the cooldown is finished. You have a ring that you can assign to your character that, because you have a dog named Torgal, who's your only sidekick, by the way, you actually have any control over in this game. And you have a ring that tells him to heal you automatically, and he knows when to attack automatically. And literally, after the first 5 hours of playing this, Adam, I turned away from the screen and mashed square and beat bosses that way.
Wow.
And that was about
weird
5
that
hours
you just described a bunch of attributes that just takes over. It just automatically does gameplay. That's just such an odd... I can't even think of another game where I equip something. I mean, yeah, widening the window for parries. I get that, but the automatically
it parries automatically. And it does it
that is
like that.
Weird.
Oh, yeah. I was like, so as I started playing the game, I'll say this too. Look, I feel like I'm bagging on the story. The story never gets bad, although maybe, again, we were talking about earlier, the last 20 hours, maybe it does. I'm at the 30-hour mark. The story is still great. Like, it's still, there's stuff happening that I didn't see coming. Some of the stuff I did see coming. Some of it that I did not. The characters are still compelling. They're still killing people off that I didn't think were going to be killed. So the story is really good. It just doesn't sustain that first 2 hours. I'm just telling you, Adam, go play the demo. It's still there to download. I guarantee you, and if you finish that 2 hours, you will text me and be like, holy effing shit.
Wow. Okay.
I know it's hard to believe. I know it's hard to convince people who don't like the franchise like Matt and I. You've got to play it for yourself. I don't think you'll understand it until you do. But
I mean, it's part of the frustration then from longtime fans. Okay, not just the turn-based, but that
the core and the cheese
so
is
different
gone.
From Final Fantasy. If it doesn't have what I don't like Final Fantasy IV, does it even live up to being a Final Fantasy game?
I think that's the question we're going to get to at the end of this discussion, is who should Square Enix be making Final Fantasy games for? Should it be for people like us, or should it be for somebody else? But we'll get there.
Yeah.
The story itself, like, every time you think it settles into a groove, something insane and heavy happens. Like, there's just, it addresses like crazy stuff like rape. Like, there's this one scene where this girl is about to get raped by like a gang of dudes. Like, they drop the F-bomb like over and over again. Like, it is a hard M. like hard M, like borderline like AO at times. Like people's heads get chopped off, people's heads get delivered in boxes. It does borrow so many things. So the lower third for this discussion right now is Final God of Thrones, because the further you get into it, the more it feels like God of War from 2018. That's kind of how the game is designed. It's not an open world game by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay, so it's kind of, there's areas that are more explorable than other areas.
But generally, it's this cattle shoot that you're constant. It's very linear. When you get to like the 20-hour mark-ish, the game does open up more, and it will give you like mission objectives all over the map, and you can kind of choose the order that you want to do them, and there's side quests here and here and here. But it's also not like Final Fantasy, in where the world map is like gameplay. So, you know, in some Final Fantasies, you go to the world map and they show like a little like like a sprite version of your character.
The super deformed little,
and you can run around in the open world, and you can even like try to avoid like random encounters with enemies. Like, it's not like that. The map screen in this is literally just a map where you choose to fast travel from. And I'll say this, the fast travel in this, awesome. You can travel anywhere you want at any time, no matter what you're doing. As long as you're not in a battle, you can fast travel anywhere you want. The way they laid out the quests in this game is great. Like, a lot of this stuff is just comfort food for people who have played a lot of other games that has not come to Final Fantasy in ever. And finally, they're here. So, side quests. You know before you talk to an NPC, one, if they have a side quest. Two, if the side quest is important. So, typically, you get like these little green icons just for a side quest. But if they're important, they'll have a plus on them. And if you see that, that's like, that is a side quest that actually has important elements for the rest of the game. For example, to get the Chocobo mount, it's a side quest with a plus. So once you do that, then you realize, oh, all those side quests that are marked like that, I need to make sure I play those. And consequently, they are the better side quests. So there's all kinds of...
How does a Chocobo fit aesthetically in this hardcore fantasy world?
Well, here's
I'm
the
trying
thing,
to figure this out.
Matt brought this up last week, and he said it before. Chocobos generally were not considered these cute little cuddly things that you race. They were these huge hulking beasts that with razor sharp beaks that were dangerous. And that returns in this game. Like, they're your mounts, and like the opening scenes before you even get it, like your dad, the king, is riding on one, and they look scary, man. They're like ostriches times like 10 or whatever. So a lot of the aesthetics of the OG Final Fantasy games, they finally brought those back around for this and have ditched the kind of corny day glow.
Interesting.
It's, again, like I haven't been a fan of Final Fantasy since the Super Nintendo era. Like, I didn't even really like Final Fantasy VII all that much on the OG PlayStation. Like, if you're like that, this is full circle, albeit with action-based combat. But the story, I mean, I'm 30 hours in. It still got me hooked. Like, I'm still into it. People are still dying. You don't know what's going to happen around each corner. It's not as good as the first 2 hours were, but it's still held up and been pretty good. So I do think that even Final Fantasy fans, at least for a big bulk of the game, will be happy with the story. I think the design too. Like, I feel like finally this series has caught up with all the other games. Now, the lack of an open world, that's probably the next hurdle for them to overcome with this franchise. Much like God of War from 2018 or Ragnarok, even though it is kind of this throwback design style, they do a good enough job with it that it doesn't feel that much like a throwback.
And to your point, open world games don't serve narrative very well.
No, it makes
like, if you can go any direction you want, you tend to weaken the narrative. If you want to tell a story, take the Naughty Dog approach. Take the Sony Santa Monica approach.
You're absolutely right, and that's what they do in this. And I think the game is better for it. So again, that's a hurdle that they'll have to overcome. And let's be honest, a lot of open world games never overcome that hurdle.
Nope.
By the end, you're just doing fetch quests, like side quests and things like that, stuff that's not really compelling. So we'll see what they decide to do. But despite the fact that the game isn't open world, there's still like these weird contrivances, like you shimmy through a narrow thing and it loads the next section of the game. like they give you a chocobo, but there's only, and you can call it anytime you want, but there's only certain areas where it even makes sense to even use it, because otherwise you're running with this gigantic bird down these pathways that are just made for your character to run down. So it does feel like the chocobo is maybe a little bit forced, or maybe they're just trying to get ready for when the game is open world and you do need mounts for, functional reasons, instead of just like, hey, I'm on a chocobo now and this is a Final Fantasy game.
They have a transferable asset from this game they can just plunk right down
into the next one. That's what I think anyway.
That makes sense.
And the game has equal parts smart stuff and dumb stuff. So very early in the game, like you have a dog, his name is Torgal, and he fights for you. And again, he's the only party member that you have any control over. Your other party members just do everything automatically. But you have this dog, and like it's the first time they let you pet the dog. And that's a big thing. Everyone's like, can you pet the dog? Well, you can pet the dog here. But the thing is you pet the dog and it shows you a different camera angle while you're petting the dog that shows you a hidden item. And I was like, oh, I'm like, that's clever. So from that point on, mentally, I'm like, I'm going to pet the dog every time because it may show me like some hidden thing. Now I'll say this, it doesn't. It only happened that very first time. But still, that's very smart design.
Yeah, I like that.
It encourages you to keep doing the action because you got rewarded for it. So there's stuff like that. But then there's another smart thing where like you don't really understand Clive, who's the main character that you play as. You're kind of trying to figure out how powerful he is, how strong he is. And there's this one scene where he's adventuring with everybody, and there's like this big collapsed boulder that's blocking the way. And he just casually just walks up and just goes, huh, and just like pushes the boulder up. You're like, oh, okay. He's like superhuman strong, and like people shouldn't mess with this guy. But then later on in the game, like people fall and they're hanging by their fingernails, and he goes to grab them and he's struggling to like pull this like 100-pound girl up. Like, so for every time they do something where you're like, oh, that's really clever, like later on they're
it's like Leon Kennedy punching boulders in RE5, right. And then seemingly like a wuss when it comes to half the other stuff.
Yeah. So it is RPG light. So if people have really gotten into Final Fantasy for the RPG elements, like really digging into the stats, like you can't adjust any of your stats. Like when you level up, all that stuff changes automatically. Wow. Yep, that just when you level up, it's just like ding, 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 ding. They all just go up automatically based. I don't even know what it's based on. I don't know where those numbers come from. And if you go to the skill trees in this, like there's one huge skill circle. And literally at the beginning of the game, you earn enough skill points very quickly to unlock every single ability there. And then like half of that circle, you can upgrade as you get like points throughout the game. And then as you unlock the summons, so basically how summons work in this, and you're aware of summons, usually they're like the biggest magical spell in the game or whatever. Yep. You have to build it up across the whole battle, and then you finish off the battle with this behemoth that comes from the sky and drops a big boulder on the enemy. They've changed for this. You actually have control of them like kind of at all times. As you progress through the campaign, Clive takes over the abilities of the summons. And if you use the L2 on the DualShock, you cycle through what are called icons and you take over the abilities of those. So a big part of the game, if the combat weren't so freaking easy, is that you set them up with your normal sword attacks, and then you switch to your icon attacks, and those are kind of like your special over-the-top attacks. But again, if you set it up, because with those 3 rings, it just does it all automatically just by smashing square. You don't have to worry about like switching between the icons. You don't have to worry about dodging or timing your dodge. Like it just does it. You literally cannot look at the screen and mash square and win boss fights in this game. So all the stuff, the skill trees, the icons that you can choose, and you can even go in and like level up the icon abilities, and you can choose each icon has like 5 abilities, and you can choose which 2 to assign to take out into battle with you. All that stuff doesn't end up mattering because the game is just too damn easy. It is literally just mash square to win once you get to a certain point in the game. Like it ruins the whole thing, in all honesty. Like it really like crushes the game in a lot of ways. It's like I'm not a big Dark Souls guy. Like I don't like games where they just beat you over the head over and over. They're like, learn how to dodge, dummy. Like I'm like, no, I want to learn how to have fun playing video games. Yeah. Like I'm not really
the other end.
This is the other end of the spectrum.
Sounds like they wanted to make a different game and it didn't work. Because it's worth remembering that Square sold off half of their company.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
and they were all the Western developers. The people,
they were all the Western developers. So now the burden's on them. This game had to come out.
Yeah,
like there was not other things for them to come out. This sounds like something. I mean, it sounds like there's all these interesting intentions that get short-circuited by the game itself. My best guess is
the game's really polished. By the way, I've not seen a single bug or even a hint of an issue. Like this game has been polished to a sheen. Like I just think that I don't know. I don't know if they didn't test it well enough. Like, the guy who made the combat, and the combat is amazing. Like, if you watch footage of this game being played, you're like, hot damn, that's insane. But what you don't realize is to do that, all you have to do is just hit square. Like, I've almost thought about that's eliminating those rings and using other rings to make the game fun to play.
It's if you go back to like the mid-era Ubisoft, that was probably the French Revolution game being, I think, the apotheosis of this, where you really could tell that all these different divisions of the development team just kind of were siloed off from one another. And it's like side quest team never talked to main story team, which never talked to combat team, which never, because that's one of those best examples where it's like combat in a vacuum, fine, but combat without fun enemies or interesting combat scenarios, not fine. And that when all those elements came together, there wasn't harmony. But in order to meet the release date, the more I think about it, one of the easiest ways to get something out the door that isn't an embarrassment insofar as it doesn't work is suddenly just make it really easy to play. I mean, the worst part is there's probably so many people out there that won't notice how easy it is to play.
Maybe. I think most people will. Because the other thing too is like those first rings that you get are like the only rings you can select. Like, you eventually unlock more rings, but you're going to slot those in and you're going to realize, man, this game just became a
Final Fantasy audience, especially. Adam, kind of
gets to what you said. Even the boss fights, I finished with a full health bar. And the craziest part was, you play the game for like 20 some hours, and at that point, it's just a cakewalk. And then they give you limit breaks 20 hours in, which is like this hyper powered like attack mode. You click both sticks and you just can go berserk. And then it just makes it even easier. Like, I have died, I'm not exaggerating, Adam, twice playing this game. Wow. Yes. I'm not exaggerating at all. And the second time I died was just a total freak accident. I got caught in like a loop where I was against a wall, and this mid boss I was fighting just fired fire at me, and I couldn't get out of it, and I died. But otherwise, you don't die. And like, that to me is not Final Fantasy, in my opinion anyway. But that's the thing. Do you make games to please the existing fan base, or do you make games to open it up to other people to expand the fan base? And Final Fantasy, its sales of 15 were pretty good. Like, I think it sold like 10 or 12 million or something like that, but it didn't sell 20. And so my guess is Square Enix is trying to open up the potential audience for Final Fantasy, but is that the right call? Should these?
I know it's such an interesting question, because
should they be making these games for like 13-year-old boys, or should they be making them for us? Like, that's because when we were 13, we liked different things, and we probably would have liked the grunty like Final Fantasy.
Also, should Final Fantasy be aging and evolving with one section of its player base,
right?
Or is Final Fantasy the thing you do between the ages of 12 and 25,
17 or whatever,
and then you move on to some other aspect of life? It's such an interesting question, because the whole gist of Final Fantasy is how malleable it was. That it was such a different game before 7. And then after 7, it kind of was within this one type of game. Like, it always can change itself up. But I never felt... the one thing I can say is I never, during my distaste for Final Fantasy, ever wanted someone to make a Final Fantasy for me. Like, I was fine without Final Fantasy in my life. Like,
I did, because I did love Final Fantasy when I was younger. And the SNES era, it was one of my favorite franchises. And I'm going through the same thing right now with Zelda. So here's the thing. I'm kind of going through the same thing with Zelda right now. Zelda, as you know, Adam, Zelda used to be my favorite video game franchise.
I'm well aware. I remember the KOTOR Wind Waker debate where I felt like I stabbed you in the heart.
Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, Adam, I am not a gigantic fan of Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. And
it's funny. I am very negative on Breath of the Wild. I'm much different on Tears of the Kingdom.
I do like Tears of the Kingdom more, but we'll get to that. But anyway, but the difference is that so it's reversing here. Like, I haven't liked Final Fantasy for a long time, but now it's changing for me, and the Final Fantasy fans are pissed off. But the difference here is that there's no replacement for the old Zelda. So if I want to play an old Zelda game, what options do I have? I have nothing. There's no other publisher makes them. There was obviously there's been a couple attempts at it here or there. They've never stuck. However, if you want to play a turn-based Japanese RPG, there are literally hundreds of options that you can play. So if you can't get turn-based JRPG out of Final Fantasy, there's just dozens of other franchises you can choose from. That's not the case with Zelda. Now that Zelda is changed into something that I don't particularly love, that's just a void. There's nothing for me to play instead to fill that void. So I know a lot of people probably would want to compare that, but it's really like apples and oranges. So it's a tough question. I think if you're Square Enix, you probably want to expand your audience. I mean,
financially you do.
Yeah,
I don't. But the thing is, it sounds like they tried to take on some things that they weren't able to accomplish.
And they tried to bring in somebody who was good at it, but he failed. I'll be honest with you. He failed. Like, he has not balanced the combat correctly. And it could be maybe not his problem. It could be the person who had to set the scaling of the enemies. Because the other thing I'll say too is that, like, generally, it's not absolute, but generally, as you go into new areas of the game, the enemies scale with you. So even though you're growing in power, you never feel like you're growing in power.
Oh God, it's Elder Scrolls 4
a little bit, unless you go back to some of the very early parts of the game, which you have no reason to go back to. Just if you want to go back there and farm, like, those enemies will still be level 13 or whatever. You can go and mop them up and be like, oh, I can kill them with one slash now. But you have no incentive to go back to those areas. So if you never feel like you're becoming more powerful in this game, other than as you attain more of the summon icon abilities, and then you can do those in combat, which just makes the combat even more easy. So it's kind of a self-defeating cycle in some ways, unfortunately.
I think what's so interesting is the problems with this game are very rare problems to encounter in a game nowadays.
They are.
Like, this is something, though, I feel like like in the PS2 era, like I ran into frequently. And it's really interesting to hear you describing this, because it sounds both familiar and really alien all at the same time.
Yep. So I've played this game for 30 hours. People are saying it's like 50 or 60 hours, and that it does lose steam over the last third of the game. I haven't really got to that point of the game yet. And I already feel like if I had spent $70 on this game, I've got my money's worth. The boss fights in this game, Adam, are they're technical marvels. They are literally some of the most amazing pieces of interactive entertainment that have ever been created.
And you know what? That was good. What mid-era, post-7 Final Fantasy was supposed to be. When that first cutscene trailer for Final Fantasy VIII came out, is one of the first things, like, when I had taken on the GameSpot TV job that came out. I mean, that was what you expected from both Square and Final Fantasy, was this cutting edge, like, visual feast. And at the very least, they've delivered on that. So in that way, they're honoring their legacy. I mean, it's weird.
The visuals are incredible. The audio in this game is amazing. And I'm a sucker for audio. As you know, I'm a DJ and I do produce music and stuff. And the audio in this is incredible. So when I play games for capture, I've mentioned this many times, I turn down the music so that when you use that footage, you can edit with it and you don't have what's called train wrecks where the music is clashing together. But what that does, it allows me to see how much work has gone into the sound design.
Yeah.
Because I hear the rustling of the clothes. I hear the footsteps. I hear the fingers rubbing against each other. And most games just cut that crap out.
Yeah.
Most games, if you hear them without the music, you can hear the sound of the wind blowing and footsteps, and that's it.
And that's it. Yeah.
And this game's Foley work is insane. It's almost
sad that, like, if you don't turn the music down, you're missing all this amazing effort that's gone into the.
You do hear it kind of like it's well mixed as well. Like, the other thing too is, like, if you play it on a good surround sound system, it sounds incredible. The directional sound is awesome. The mix is good. The production values in this game are amazing. Graphically, auditory, both off the charts, awesome. And now they do cheat a little bit because it's not an open world, which helps you, dedicate more polys to certain things. But whatever. The bottom line is the game looks and sounds amazing. So I think both of those things are up to Final Fantasy standards. Again, I already feel like I've got $70 worth of entertainment out of this game. The story could take a dump on itself in the last 10 hours. And I'd be like, that sucks. Maybe the game shouldn't have been that long, but I still got 70 hours of entertainment, or $70 of entertainment out of this game. And that's where I'm sitting with this game. Like, there's just so many, it's just bonkers, the stuff that happens in this game. And again, that's where you get the Final Fantasy payoff. There's just stuff where you're just like, what? Like, how do you even think of something like that and then make it happen inside the game? So there's all kinds of marvel. Yeah, there's all kinds of marvel and wonder in the game. I think it nails that part of Final Fantasy. Really, my biggest complaint is that it's just too easy. You can just mash your way through the entire game. And if the story does indeed fall on its face later on, then that's a ding that I would give it. But I'm 30 hours in and that hasn't happened yet. So
now is it possible, since it sounds like the story is quite interesting, that given how easy it is, you could just kind of mainline the campaign and really just kind of ignore the side stuff? I'm wondering if that might be a fun way, or at least for something like me, like I'll get a lot of the visual spectacular and this like tough as nails story, which I don't expect from Final Fantasy whatsoever. Because
you can definitely do that. Because again, the way that they label the side quests. So if you just see a green icon above like an NPC's head, that's just like generally go fetch something and bring it back to me quest. If it has the plus, that's the only side quest that you really need to do. And I've been playing it for 30 hours and I've only come across like 4 of them total. So, and yes, otherwise you can just plow through the game. It is very linear. You never are wondering like where I need to go. It is very hand-holdy in that way, but I'm okay with that. Like I'm not the guy who wants to wander around like reading this obscure note I found tucked away in some closet somewhere that's like, now you need to go over to blah, blah, blah. Like I prefer games that do
one of my bigger complaints about Tears of the Kingdom is like, would you mind holding my hand once or twice?
Tell me where I need to go. I agree. That's a big complaint of mine with it too. So I guess back to the question that I have is like, who should these games be made for? I think they need to be made for the biggest audience possible. If you're making a 60-hour game, that's a huge investment. They've worked on this game for like 7 or 8 years. And to be like, you know what? We're going to make it for the same 7 or 8 million people that buy it in the first month and then the other 3 million that trickle in over time. I just think that's a losing strategy. And I think it's going to make the games better. I feel like this is the best Final Fantasy I've played, even with it being so easy, since the SNES era, even despite all the flaws that I found.
That's amazing. All right. I actually, I may be no longer a games industry professional, but I still have interest like it. So I want to check this out. Just, I've got to see, I've got to see this.
Play the demo. Just go download the demo and play it. It's 2 hours long. You will know when you're done with that whether you want to buy the whole game. You will know. And that's the other thing I would say to people who are watching this right now. If you're still on the fence, and you're like, man, I don't know, download that demo. Now, I will say this, the game doesn't quite hold that standard the whole way through, but that vibe is sustained throughout the entire time. So if you play that demo and it resonates with you, I feel very confident in I would tell you to go buy the game at $70, honestly, like from that demo. But
I don't have children. I'm happy to spend $70 on a game.
I mean, to your point earlier, like you're right, games should be way more expensive than they are. Like, I've never complained about them bumping it up to 70. There is a little bit of like some of Nintendo's games. I'm like, and they've been good about it, like not jacking up the price of their Kirby games to $70.
Yeah, the Kirby game, I was like, and it was more like you could have just warned me it was going to end.
Yeah,
like it felt so abrupt. I'm like, oh, we're here.
Yeah.
I like that Kirby game though.
Yeah, you liked it?
It was for it being a Kirby game. Yeah.
Well, it was a 3D platformer Kirby. Exactly. It's way overdue. Exactly. I really liked it too. So anyway, what I'm getting at here is that I do recommend that you go buy it. Like I have played this for 30 hours. If you don't think 30 hours of entertainment is worth $70, then we're just sitting on different scales here. I personally do think it's worth it. And my guess is I'll probably get at least another 10 hours out of it before the story starts to fall to crap.
I still never think you should put a dollar amount to your hours of enjoyment.
You're right.
It's so hard to do. But if that equation doesn't work for you, I need to know what you're waiting for in life. Because
good luck. You're gonna be waiting a long ass time.
I have some words for you on legal prostitution.
Yeah. And it does capture Final Fantasy. It has like, it could maybe use a little more levity, a couple more jokes here or there, but the jokes are good. Like they're legitimately funny and they land.
Oh, that's good.
Which is the writing in this, Adam, is incredible. It literally is like the writer from Game of Thrones wrote this game. I'm not exaggerating. It's that good. Like,
wow.
Yeah, okay. I know it's like hard. I still can't believe it. My mind is blown by this game in some ways. So I'm telling you to go buy it. It has all the crazy off the wall stuff. It has a chocobo with an eye patch. What more do you want?
Yeah, I think my only hang up with this game is what we talked about earlier. Time. Just figuring out where I put it into my already pre-planned game schedule.
Which goes back to my question of, are games just too damn long now?
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, there you go. That's my final take on Final Fantasy XVI. We'll probably be back next week when Matt's back on the show, because I know he's been playing it. I have a feeling he's probably going to share a lot of the same opinions that I've had playing through the final version of the game, but we'll see. You never know with Matt and I. He surprises me sometimes, and I'm sure I surprise him sometimes.
I keep tabs from afar. I know sometimes you two are simpatico, especially with because I'm on board with you. What was that Metroid game?
Metroid Dread.
Yeah. I was not the biggest fan of that one. Like, you two are happy to be apostates together, but then I've also heard the two of you clash.
Oh, like, we have thrown down for sure, man. That's passion, though. Look, if you're gonna do what we've been doing, as long as we've been doing it, Adam. Yeah. If you don't have that passion, it's not happening, man.
Yeah. I'll tell you more about Metroid Dread when we're talking about Zelda, because it ties into my whole thing with Nintendo.
I can't wait to hear that. I can't wait to hear your impressions of Zelda either, honestly, because you definitely seem to like it more than I do. So I'll be interested to hear some of maybe your rebuttals to some of my criticisms of the game.
Yeah.
See what you have to say.
It's also just how you play the game. I think if I was playing it like I did some other games recently, or like in the old era, I wouldn't care for it.
No. Okay, so there you go. That's Final Fantasy 16, at least my final impressions of it. I'm guessing Matt will chime in next week with his final impressions as well.
That man knows how to chime.
Yeah, he does. Absolutely. Next up, we're going to talk about the biggest event from the week. We were wondering, like, why is Nintendo sitting out Summer Game Fest, not E3, whatever the hell you want to call it? We were like, man, PlayStation did a big press conference. Xbox did a big press conference. Some of the third parties did one. Where's Nintendo? Out of the blue, Nintendo's like, hey, we're going to do a Nintendo Direct. A little later than everybody else, but we're going to do one. And then the big question really, Adam, was like, what the hell are we supposed to be playing on Switch for the next, like, year? At that point, before this Direct, all we knew about was Pikmin 4. That's it. There were no other Metroid Prime 4, which at this point, I think we can all agree is a launch game for the next Switch.
Yeah.
I mean, that's that Mario Kart 9.
Anybody who thought this game was imminent when they announced it in that ramshackle fashion,
it's been 6 years since they announced it, Adam.
Right, but don't you remember the title card they put up? Yeah. It was like they quickly got an intern with MS Paint to put something together, slapped a 4 on it. Everyone's acted like it was around the corner, and like I needed to come out of retirement and bitch slap the entire world. I was so angry.
Well, Nintendo finally answered the question of, like, what the hell are we going to be playing until the Nintendo Switch 2 launches, which I'm really starting to wonder now, Adam, if that might be sooner than later. Because this Direct gave us games for the rest of the year, and then 2 more games for next year, and that's it.
I think it needs to be next year. In all honesty,
I know they usually launch their hardware Q1. I really think it's going to be holidays next year for Switch.
There's no reason why they shouldn't do holidays. The Switch was so successful, I think, beyond their expectations, that holiday and then next year, the best reason of when to launch your game should be how much can you make available.
Yeah.
Like, should have nothing to do, like, Nintendo will sell. That's like, that is now, like, we're back in that era of Nintendo, but it's now, don't sell out. Like, just keep selling.
I think launch lineup for Switch 2 as it sits right now, Metroid Prime 4, Mario Kart 9, and a special version of Tears of the Kingdom that looks better and plays better.
That's
and doesn't bottom out at 8 frames per second. That's one hell of a launch.
And you know what? Maybe repackage all those 3D Marios and put it back on sale again with Mario Galaxy 2.
Right. Yeah, that was a huge omission, which is like the best 3D Mario ever. I was like,
know.
what are you doing?
I go back and forth between that and the original Galaxy. I can't decide which.
Yep.
So
it is a tough one. But I think 2 is more refined. One felt fresher and more unique, obviously.
Yeah.
But anyway, so finally Nintendo has this Direct, and it tells us, you know what? You're going to be playing more than Pikmin 4 over the next 6 months. It's first, I think, the biggest announcement from the Nintendo Direct. Some people may argue with this. I personally think the biggest announcement was Super Mario Brothers Wonder. It is the first new 2D Mario Brothers game in more than 10 years.
Yeah.
Don't you think that's crazy?
For me, I what were those other ones called? 10 years
It's
ago.
like new Super Mario Brothers.
And I did not like them because the weight of Mario felt wrong to me.
It was different. Yeah.
Yeah. And this, I'm guessing from what I looked at visually, it looked like it was more in line with the classic 2D Mario.
Yeah, I think my big concern with it right now is I'm not sure that it has a real hook to it. It's called Super Mario Brothers Wonder, and the Wonder part is like a flower. It's a flower that you can activate that transforms the world for a brief period of time, and it like enemies just appear out of nowhere and the environments change briefly. That seems to be the big hook for the game. I don't know if that's enough. Obviously, what everyone's really latched onto though is like Elephant Mario. He can transform into like an elephant, like. It's like it's so easy for Nintendo. Like they can literally just do
from Galaxy,
anything. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how stupid the idea is. The fans are just going to eat it up. It's like like the one scene in the trailer where like Luigi rides by and like gives a nasty stare. Like that turned into a meme that lasted for like 2 years. Like Nintendo fans will just latch on to anything and make it a meme.
I know.
And that has already become a meme, obviously. It's all over social media now. I
like the fact that the hook doesn't look too overwhelming.
Yeah.
I sometimes get anxious when I think that they've leaned. I got really worried. I was not the biggest fan of Odyssey, but I got really worried when they showed New Donk City. Yeah. Because
it's Mario with humans and stuff. It's like, what?
Yeah, I did like that idea, and it looked like some of the worst elements of Sunshine, where it's almost too environmental, that it isn't as deliberate. I like deliberate Mario. That's why I love 2D Mario. Some level designer has sat there and goes, and then you're going to do that, and then you're going to do that, and then you're going to do that. That's what I loved about Galaxy.
Super Mario Odyssey, by the way, first 3D Mario game ever that I did not get every star, every shine, or whatever.
Same with me.
I just got through. I finished the game. Yep. I went back and got like 5 more, and I was like, I'm good.
It just wasn't compelling.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like I can't say it's not bad. Yeah.
Not sublime like 3D Marios usually are.
It really felt like the tail end of a relationship when you're just going out to dinner together.
Yep, that's a pretty good analogy. But I'm sure for the young kid, like I have a nephew who got every shine or every moon or whatever.
It's
like
their first Mario.
And he's like completely obsessed with it. So I mean, that's kind of going back to what we were saying about Final Fantasy. Like, who do you make the games for? So are you making Mario for my nephews, or are you making it for me? Probably smarter to make it for my nephews, let's be honest. So I kind of understood.
Kind of what you were saying about the old Zeldas and things like that. Nintendo can solve this problem, though. If Nintendo stops behaving so strange with their back catalog, the way that they do, make it available. Make it so that, like, either with a monthly subscription fee or whatever you want, I can have that back catalog. You can fuck Mario over 5 times over. Excuse the profanity, because I can still go back to what I love.
Yeah.
And it's just such a weird one. And that's why I think that we put too much weight on what the new iteration is, because it might be all we have.
Yeah.
But if you give me Galaxy 1 and 2, that's 3 years of entertainment. Because I can dip in and
those
dip
games
out.
Are gigantic as well.
Yeah.
And they're worth playing all the way to the last.
Yeah, exactly.
Drop. Yep. We did get some details. Super Mario Brothers Wonder features Princess Peach, Princess Daisy, and Yoshi as playable characters. And then there's also other playable characters, the ones that you've got before in 2D Mario games like Mario, Luigi, and Toad. And as I said, it includes the debut of the brand new power-up for Elephant Mario. Still not 100% sure what that's going to do. I'm guessing they're going to build stages where you can just run through them and just destroy them. I don't know.
Maybe it's the new, invincibility star. It's a fun way to do it. Just stampede.
That's a good idea, actually. But then the big surprise is the game is coming out on October 20th, very soon. Also, by the way, October is turning into a nightmare for people who do this for a living. Yeah. There are literally like 20 gigantic games coming out in October.
So happy I picked this year to not have anything to do with the games.
It's going to be overwhelming. Like, I don't know how we're going to do it. Like, we're going to be covering October games like halfway into November because we're just not going to have enough time to get to them.
November looks kind of light unless
Yeah.
Because I think everyone thought Starfield was a November release.
Yeah. There's just so many. October's gonna be overwhelming, but that's another one that's October 20th. The other big game that I think some people may say was the biggest game in this direct is Super Mario RPG. It's a remake of the very first Super Mario RPG for the Super Nintendo. This franchise has continued on all this time, but the last like 3 entries have just been so forgettable. And in a lot of ways, they got away from the core kind of timing-based, turn-based combat of the original, and have kind of gone off in these other directions. Like the last one was like all about collecting like stickers. Like I feel like people have been waiting for this franchise to get back to its roots for a long time. And what better way to do that than to remake the freaking original? I think this is a brilliant idea. I know people like to slag, not just Nintendo, but lots of publishers for remaking games.
No, I do not. I
don't really either, honestly. I don't ever. If they do a good job, I don't care.
Well, people act like there were resources that were going to go towards something else if it wasn't for this. And I'm like, you need to work in a company.
Yeah.
And understand how things.
Well, you also have to realize that your company needs to make money to keep paying your paycheck.
The question I have, and this is just my question all the time with Nintendo, I'm gonna play it. I'm happy for it. I'm excited. But why? I wish they're so strange and mercurial about their remakes that if they could at least belie, like, does that mean we're gonna see the reemergence of new RPGs? That would be great. But it's like they do
context somehow.
And they act like some kind of like cutesy Dr. Evil, like
they're gift givers, Adam. They're giving fans the gift that they've been asking for.
I mean, it's like, look, people. I'm going to keep on hitting on this probably for the rest of the show until we talk about Zelda. Nintendo is a company that's run by adults.
Yeah.
And people need to start realizing that.
Yeah.
Like, everyone treats Nintendo like it's the village idiot.
Yeah.
And that the mere fact it gets its pants on in the morning is worth celebrating. And I'm so sick and tired of it. And Nintendo plays into that.
Yeah.
It's like, why are they doing this?
Because it works.
It works because of this slavish, it's like a Nuremberg rally of toddlers of these people, many of whom are in the press, that just eat this up and act like the most undignified numbnuts.
Yeah.
I like Nintendo games, but I like them begrudgingly for all these Nintendo
other
fans
reasons that you don't like.
Embarrass me. Oh, God.
Yeah.
It's just interesting that they chose this. It just, I don't know. They need to there are times I wish Nintendo would act like adults and explain their logic.
Yeah, that's never going to happen. It takes away the mystique, Adam, if they do that. The Nintendo mystique is gone.
But their mystique is acting like a blithering idiot that pees itself.
But you know what they're just going to say? Scoreboard.
Oh, I know. They're going to make money. But the thing is, they make money on it until they don't. Because you and I remember the back half of the Wii. And I was
remember the Wii U
from the rooftops that was going to happen.
I mean, we remember the N64 and the GameCube.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Both of those, in Nintendo's regards, were failures. Like big-time failures.
It's the amazing amnesia that Nintendo has when they're successful. They seem to so wholly forget.
Well, they were bailed out by the fact that they ditched the handheld part. Like now that they unified their development, they're making games for just one platform. They're okay. When they were spread thin, and they had to decide, do we make another 3DS game? Do we make another Wii U game? That's when they're stretched too thin and they couldn't do it. Now, I think to your point, I think their hubris has come from that decision that was very smart has given them this boastful, almost like perspective.
But they were that way during the Wii until they realized no one was buying games for it.
Yeah,
and like the second half of the console cycle,
no one was buying games for it.
Yeah, you make money off of software. The second half of the console cycle, they were somehow thinking people were going to keep buying Wiis, which is just like that's like thinking.
Well, they sold like 150 million of them. It's like no, like everybody has one. Like you rely on those people buying games, and they just never did. They're like,
I just will never forget the grief I got for calling the Wii U what it was the moment they announced it.
Yeah.
And I was right.
Yeah, well, remember, we were like, I had to go and like check under the cabinets to see if it was a Wii or a Wii U.
Yeah, I know.
People thought it was just a Wii with a tablet.
Oh, I was
like,
screaming
no, there's new hardware down there.
I was screaming at Matt through the IFB. I'm like, Matt, is this a new console? Is this a new console? And Matt had to go,
Nobody knows.
No one knows what this is. And it's like, It was, oh God.
Yep.
Yeah.
So anyway, Super Mario RPG is coming back. If you guys don't know, the plot is very simple. You're basically just trying to wipe out the Smithy gang because they have stolen 7 stars that you need in order to repair the Star Road. And that's pretty much it. It's turn-based combat.
Works.
It
and I like
work.
that.
Yeah.
It works.
It's turn-based combat where you time like the button presses with Mario's jump. So it's like active turn-based combat. It was popular then. I believe it's going to be popular now. It comes out on November 17th. So another game is coming out in the very near future that was just announced. So I think Super Mario RPG is going to be great. I think it's going to be big, particularly for people who weren't around when the original came out for Super Nintendo. And obviously the graphics are just like a gigantic overhaul. It's like night and day. So
go ahead, you've got me thinking now, because Nintendo does like to, well, only recently have they been releasing like big stuff in the first quarter. Mm-hmm. But one of the big things that we've always talked about is that the minute you announce a new console, your current console sales just
they start to flatline. Yeah.
And I think that software sometimes gets hit as well, because you've seen the new shiny thing and it's like, but my current shiny thing isn't as shiny.
Yep. And do I want to keep spending money on this not quite as shiny thing, or do I want to save it for the shinier thing?
Could Nintendo do something as radical that's being done in the music industry quite successfully, announcing drop within an incredibly short window? And it's something I hope they do, that could the beginning of next year.
You think first quarter maybe still for a new hardware?
I'm throwing it out there as an option, or early second quarter.
There's only 2 Switch games announced for next year, and you figure this will probably be out in the first quarter.
Ideally, all old Switch games play on this new one without any hiccup. And I think we learned that
today, actually. In fact, that's a little news tidbit from today, is that people were trying to get Nintendo to talk about Switch 2, and the only thing they would say is that your eShop account is going to be really important for Switch 2, meaning it's going to be backwards compatible.
That strikes me as the minute you solve that problem, and then it's a hardware upgrade.
Notice that they said that first, Adam. To your point about people losing interest in games and hardware when you announce the new one, Nintendo basically saying, look, the new Switch is going to be backwards compatible. That should keep people from not buying games. So they're like, if they're afraid, like, well, I don't want to buy Super Mario RPG because Switch 2 is going to come out next May, and then I won't care about it anymore. If you know that you're going to be able to play that game on Switch 2, then why not buy it? So,
well, also I just got the Zelda edition because I had like a launch edition Switch that was just garbage. It just stopped working well.
Yeah. So you got the OLED, the new,
right, and it's really nice. I don't know how much more improvement for the handheld element. They just need to fix the TV element for old farts like me that don't take their Switch anywhere.
Yeah, I always play on TV.
That's what books are for.
Yeah, I play on TV like 99%.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I'm starting to think, the only question is, whether or not it's quite possible that a game like Metroid Prime 4, that it will not perform on TV at all without the Switch 2. Maybe it could work very well.
I think there will be games that will be only Switch 2 for sure. Yeah. But I think Zelda, they will make it cross-platform. They'll make it work on Switch 2, and you'll still be able to play the older one on Switch 2.
I know. The thing that's going to kill me is there's no way I'm going to go back and play Zelda again.
No.
And before I started playing this one, it was with that knowing that they could very well do this, and I'm going to just be screaming to the heavens.
You made the decision.
I could have played a better version.
You made your choice, Sessler, and now you got to live with it. Moving on to some of the other games that are announced. Those were the 2 big ones. Everything else is kind of smaller. Detective Pikachu Returns was announced. Mm-hmm. That's coming out on October 6th. Did you play the first Detective Pikachu?
No, I'm an adult.
It wasn't very good. It did end up selling pretty well, though.
Yes, for children.
Yeah, it seems like it's
humans that do the squee when the Nintendo does anything.
It does seem to be a direct continuation of the first game. For those of you who did play it and enjoyed it, I'm not one of those people, but again, that is coming October 6th, so that's another game that's coming very soon. And then another game that they showed was a new Princess Peach game. And that is one of the games that Nintendo announced for 2024. I really can't draw any conclusions about it other than it appears to be 2D and side scrolling. The rest of it, I was like, what is going on here? It's very weird what they showed.
I mean, I look at it more from just a monetary standpoint, that's one of the few characters that they've never really exploited very well.
She had her GBA game.
She's
had like two of her own games so far.
All I remember is trying to play Princess. Like the weird thing about Princess Peach in Super Mario Brothers 2, which wasn't even a Mario Brothers game. She was the floaty one that only had
her camisole would help her float.
Yeah.
It gave you a lot of room for error, basically.
Yeah, I guess I still haven't seen the movie.
Oh, you haven't?
No, I haven't. I just didn't go to the theater.
It's good.
I've heard it's a lot of fun.
It's not great, but if you are a Nintendo fan, there are moments.
I've heard there's a lot there.
Yeah,
I still just remember everyone acting so shocked that it made money, and I'm like,
I was shocked that it wasn't abysmal. Is what I will say. I really thought it was going to be awful.
That group at Universal is good at. They never make the best animated movies, but they never make horrific animated movies. Like it's like it was the right direction for Nintendo to go. I'll probably watch it at home.
It's worth watching for sure.
Yeah, but it sounds like there's a song about her in the movie.
Yes, there is a very awful song that other people seem to have latched onto. Like it's incredible.
Yeah, I guess Keeley at his musical festival of himself. That happened last night.
Hearing that song live, like I probably just would have walked out at that point. I've been like, okay, I'm good. I'll beat the traffic. But that was like the highlight of the concert.
Right. So
for most people, they love that song. I don't know why. It's like the dumbest thing ever.
It's that kind of zeitgeist. I think that
I could have done
Nintendo's capitalizing on.
That is not the height of Jack Black's powers. That song. Like I could have made that song. But anyway, so there is a Princess Peach game coming next year. We don't know much about it. And then Pikmin 4, which was the only game we really knew about before, it got like a pretty big blowout. The big bullet points for that were you can customize your character, which is something you've never been able to do in Pikmin. And then you can now, normally for Pikmin, one of the big parts of the game was that you needed to get back to the mothership before night came.
Yeah.
Because at night, all the dangerous creatures came out, and there was a scene. You're like, oh, I made it back, and all the creatures come running out. It's too late. I got back in the ship. Well, now you can stay out at night and fight those tougher enemies, and they gave you new Pikmin called Glow Pikmin that can help you fight the enemies at night. So those are the two things. How excited are you for Pikmin 4, Adam?
Look, the franchise never resonated with me. What's interesting, part of it was I think I never liked the tutorials.
They're too long.
Well, but also it doesn't, and I never got out of it with a full understanding. Like once it throws you out there with that time limit, I always screwed up, and I never.
They ended up ditching the time limits eventually. Like they softened that like big time because a lot of people agreed with you. Like they did not like that part of the game. And so they've made concessions over the last couple installments to kind of fix that, and that has carried over to Pikmin 4, but.
It just never was it was also Morgan just absolutely went to that like water to a sponge, which always is like, good, I can just kind of like do something else. So I can't see myself taking the time to play Pikmin 4.
The other thing too, it's been so long since Pikmin 3, you do almost have to re-educate yourself on the franchise again to play it again. And I can see a lot of people like you being like, no, I'm good. The other thing too,
it's just that's the thing is that for me, and I think for a lot of adults, it's like it's not a money thing; it's a time thing.
Yeah,
and
it does get that way. Time is money as you get older. People always said that to me when I was young.
50
like,
this
what
year.
Are you talking about? I got all the time in the world. They're like, well, someday you won't. And I have hit that point of my life where I
am more angry about wasting time on something than I am about spending money on something.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
Yep. Yeah, I value my time a lot. So Pikmin 4 is coming out pretty soon as well. So there's a nice little healthy mini library of stuff for Switch coming in the very near future.
And then cross fingers that Nintendo does something very, very business savvy. And like there won't be that lull because I think post Pikmin 4, I think you're right. A lull happens.
Yeah.
Excuse me, it could happen because nothing big happens until this next console.
Waiting until the console. And then manufacturing issues. Do they have problems like getting enough components for it to build enough? It's going to be PS5 and Xbox Series all over again, probably. Very hard to get.
And I, because you have Pachter on a lot.
Pachter does a show for us.
That's right. But he taught me the one thing that finally made more sense about like what happens with these supply issues is that for those mega, processing plants like Foxconn over in Shenzhen, is that when you order like a lane, a manufacturing lane, and those lanes make they make product in the hundreds of thousands. Like you can't say I need 10,000 more. No, you get 100,000 more.
You place big bets. Yeah,
you need to know that things are going to be big. Nintendo had eaten shit on consoles for a while up in before the Switch. That was the problem with the ramp up. I think it's safe to say Nintendo can bank large on this one. So I'm all the more hopeful for that because their components are not complex components. That's why Nintendo consoles always are so cheap.
Well, yeah, the chip in the Switch is like 10 years old.
Yeah, it's like a dude on a bicycle.
Yeah, or a squirrel on a wheel.
Yeah.
A couple other smaller things that were announced in the Direct. A new WarioWare Move It was announced. That's also coming in November 3rd.
Now, if there is a franchise I associate with you, Shane, it is WarioWare.
Because you made me go through so many
hijinks for reviews of WarioWare.
Would reenact the mini games inside the reviews that I would do for that on X-Play. Yeah, that was fun, man, doing those. I'm sure it probably wasn't very fun for you, but I had fun shooting.
I was like, okay, as long as I don't have 5 other things to do today, it's good.
Yeah, we'll be fine. Yep. Well, the new WarioWare comes with 200 micro games. It appears to have like a big multiplayer focus this time, but really the vibe that I got from it was it almost feels like it's morphed into like a competitor for Just Dance. Like, it's also almost just turned into kind of like this waggle to the music and to the rhythm thing now, which to me, that's not what WarioWare was ever about. It was about this absurd mini game that happened so quickly that your brain didn't have time enough to process it before they threw another insane mini game at you. And so you start this next one while you're still laughing at the last one, and then you get bombarded with something else that's insane. It's like this self-repeating cycle of awesome. That to me is WarioWare. Like, I don't know that what I saw of Move It has really kind of displayed that. So I'm a little nervous about it, but I'll be honest, the last WarioWare, the other thing about WarioWare games to me is like, you play it once and then you get the jokes. And then it's just not fun anymore because you've learned how to beat the mini games and like, they're not funny anymore. So it holds very little value for replays, and you can generally play through a WarioWare in like 2 hours and play through all the micro games. So
like, it's actually a pretty hard game to make. Like, as small as those games may be, there is work that still has to go into their development.
Yeah, it's like Matt says about Sonic games all the time. Like, a developer will work for 6 months building a level that takes you 55 seconds to go through. Like, WarioWare is the same deal. It's like a lot of work for a very small outlay of time to actually play it. So again, that's coming on November 3rd. And then a brand new Dragon Quest Monsters was announced called Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince. Again, this game is coming early December, I think December 1st. And for those of you who don't know, because it's been a while since we got a Dragon Quest Monsters, is this basically just Square Enix's take on Pokemon.
That's right.
It's just a turn-based RPG where you go out and collect critters, and then you train them, and you breed them, and you just build your party.
I like to call it dogfighting for children.
Yes, that's pretty much what it is. Cockfighting for children. So again, that's coming out on December 1st. The franchise has never been a huge hit, but it is kind of perfect for Nintendo because I don't think that there's a big Pokemon game coming out this Q4, if I remember correctly.
I haven't heard of one.
And if you fill that void with a Pokemon-like, you'll probably do okay sales-wise, particularly with the huge installed base on Switch at this point. So I think that's probably a smart move for Nintendo to money hat that to get it exclusively on its console. And I don't think anybody else would have. So Square Enix went to the right partner on that, I think. And then a couple smaller things. Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, which was a 3DS Luigi's Mansion game, and a real Luigi's Mansion game, I would add. Like, they didn't really skimp on that at all. Like, it was legit 3D Luigi's Mansion. They are bringing that to Switch. It's being completely remade with all new graphics.
Okay, so it's not kind of here's a game that's not going to, Metroid Dread.
No, they've completely redone it with basically the same level of visuals as Luigi's Mansion 3, which I really love, by the way.
That's really cool. That, like, it actually isn't a cynical, just transfer the code over
Nope, they completely rebuilt it. They announced Wave 5 of the Mario Kart 8 Booster Pass. They're starting to wind that down, which again leads me to believe that Mario Kart 9 is waiting in the wings.
That's a very good,
all that DLC is winding down. And I mean, just think, you could launch Switch 2 with just Mario Kart 9.
Yeah.
But you're going to have that and Metroid. Like, it's going to be one hell of a launch. And then they announced Pikmin 1 and 2 for Switch, and that was one of those things where they announced it and they're like, and it's live right now.
See, now that makes sense.
Yeah.
Granted, they're not remastered like no. I guess it's more in line with the I'm blanking on with the 3D Mario All-Stars stuff.
Yeah. So, it's just like, hey, we have this old code and we got it to run at 1080p. And that's good enough.
It's that's called Pikmin Dolphin Emulator.
Pretty much. Pretty much. Let's just be honest. Because the Dolphin Emulator is actually better than the emulator that Nintendo uses to emulate some of this stuff. It's really bizarre.
You can even see it with Galaxy. It's something.
You can. And that is the Nintendo Direct, which basically ended up being Nintendo's not E3 press conference. Adam, what kind of a letter grade would you give that Nintendo Direct? And you can give pluses and minuses too.
Yeah, I would say B+, because the Mario wasn't expected.
Yeah.
And it was welcome.
I really thought we were going to see a 3D Mario because it's been forever since we got Odyssey.
Yeah. And that's the problem. It's kind of reminiscent of that notorious BlizzCon where everyone expected Diablo 4 and they got the mobile Diablo. Immortal, it's not as horrifying. Like it's not the tin ear of that. But Nintendo, a lot of times, because it's got that kind of North Korea, nothing bad can ever happen here vibe. Yeah, I said it. That when they're like, no, it reminds you it's not the Mario you kind of was thinking about.
Yeah.
And
well, also, I mean, here's the other thing.
That there's something waiting in the wings.
I mean, the 3D Mario could also be ready for the launch of Switch 2.
That's what I'm saying, is that problem is resolved very quickly in my theory that the window between announced to launch of the new console, including a new Mario, is right around the corner.
It could be the greatest Nintendo console launch lineup in history. If those 4 games we've talked about are there at launch, unreal.
I mean, all of the breadcrumbs are there for that. So,
yep. I am going to give the Direct a B-. All
right.
I think the first 2 games we talked about, big deals, smart ideas, going to sell really well, going to get the fan base excited, but I feel like it just kind of fell off a cliff after that. Nintendo showing that Princess Peach game, to me, is a big harbinger of what's going on here. Like, that game should not have been shown at all. And in the last, 7 years, Nintendo would not have shown that game. Like, it doesn't show, these weird concept things anymore. That's not something that Nintendo does anymore. Like, I wouldn't even be surprised if we never see that game ever again. And so that's to me,
very not like Nintendo to show something anymore. And it not to show up.
It used to be. Like, Nintendo used to show lots of weird little demos that Miyamoto would work on, and then either they would never come out or they would be rolled into a Star Fox game or something. That Princess Peach game may never see the light of day, and we haven't seen Nintendo present something like that in a long time. To me, that shows you Switch winding down, about to wind up the next console. And, press conferences at the end of a console's life cycle are like this. You get a couple big games, you get a bunch of other crap most people don't care about. That, to me, was this Nintendo Direct. Good, but not great. But to me, a sign of awesome things right around the bend. All right. It's time for us to move on. We're going to talk next about, Madam, do you like XCOM?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you do? Okay.
I do.
It's a polarizing franchise.
I know.
People either love it or they hate it. Very few people are middle of the road about XCOM.
Well, it's also, it's really, really hard.
It is hard.
So it really gets down to what do you want out of a gaming experience. I don't fault people who don't play it, and I don't fault people who almost have a visceral reaction when it's brought up.
Well, one of the things that makes it hard, obviously, is the permadeath in it. You spend a lot of time, you can build up a character because a big part of it is squad construction and squad building. You have this base where you're recruiting people and bringing them in, and you're training them for very specific things. And then finally you bring them off the shelf and you take them out into a mission and they die. And you're like, oh my God, I spent 3 hours building Eric and now Eric is dead.
It allows for a type of failure very few games these days allow for.
Have the guts
you can plant the seeds for your own demise without knowing it hours before you figure it out. So,
well, we have another XCOM clone. This one is set in the Aliens universe. It is called Aliens Dark Descent. And I'll say this, when they did not promote this game very much. When they first put the trailer out, like, it looked like a squad-based shooter. But then they showed like some other things. We were like, wait a minute, it looks like they're like taking cover or something. And I was like, that looks like XCOM. But they kind of were very specific to try to steer it away from the XCOM comparisons. But now I've played it, and it is absolutely XCOM. It is a squad-based isometric strategy game where you do very much the same thing that you do in XCOM. You have a base where you're building the base itself, because if you actually build out the base with XP, it becomes better at training soldiers and getting them ready to go out on the battlefield. You take 4 out at a time. If they can faint, and you can try to help them while they fainted, or they can die altogether. And then you could go to like an APC, and you can withdraw another character out of the APC and bring them on the mission with you. One thing I will say is that it's more flexible than XCOM. Like, XCOM wouldn't let you do that. Like, XCOM is like, if you lose somebody, you need to finish this mission with what you got left. This game will let you go back to like a little APC thing and re-withdraw somebody if they do die. But if somebody just has a concussion or passes out, and you don't have the medical supplies to rebuild, they stay there. And then you have to, maybe if you want, you can go back and try to rescue them still. So there are some tweaks to the formula here. They don't really say like where in the Aliens timeline this game is taking place, unfortunately. Or if they did, I totally missed it. But the basic storyline is you're on a big space base, and a ship shows up to the space base, and there's an alien in the cargo hold, and the container that the alien is opens up, the alien comes out, all hell breaks loose. There's aliens on the space station. There's other space stations floating around you, these massive ships. But you look at those, and the same thing has happened to them. You can see through the windows that there's aliens in those too. So you administer this protocol that basically uses all these satellite lasers, these space lasers that blow up the ships to kill the aliens and kill, obviously, your crew on board or whatever. You try to escape. You're on this other ship that like crash lands or whatever, and you land, and basically the whole objective of the game then is to try to fix the ship to get out of there. And of course, as you get there, you discover this other base. You discover that there's a cult that actually worships the aliens, and the aliens somehow leave them alone. The story of it is actually, I was pleasantly surprised by the story in this. And the tension and the consequence, I thought, were pretty good. The problem is then you start playing it. And just for the record, and this is important for this game, I played this game on PlayStation 5 because I have had tons of issues with bugs and other stuff in this game that apparently are only on PlayStation. Like, if I looked at reports from the PC and the Xbox versions of this, and they were not having the issues that I've had, but literally on PlayStation, so it just ignores commands. Like, so how the game works is you use a cursor to move your crew around, and the squad moves together. So if you put your cursor on a piece of cover and hover over it, it will show what your squad's going to do. It'll show that like 1, 2, 3, 4. There's like dots that will show you how they're going to basically orient themselves to cover. Now, once they go there, you still have to give them the command to actually hunker down, which is really freaking annoying. And I don't know why.
What?
Yes, I don't know why, but you do.
But also, it's not like XCOM where you're limited in how many spaces you can move, but you can move each individual unit independent.
There's no grid. You can individually instruct the units, but you instruct them individually for combat and healing and stuff like that. Like, the way the combat works in this, you can't flank. Like, there's very little strategy involved in this. So again, you're playing from an isometric perspective, which is handy because it does mean that you can see the aliens that are kind of far away.
Yeah.
But you can also throw down like the sensors from the Aliens franchise that will tip you off to where they are. And once they start coming at you, like, there's really only one thing you can do, and that is find a choke point, a place where all the pathways converge into one like alleyway, which means that no matter where the aliens are coming from, they're going to come to that one spot, and then post up and figure out the exact optimum distance that your weapons can fire, and then post up there and wait for them to come into the choke point and then unload on them. But how the combat works is you squeeze R2 on the PlayStation controller, and it brings up this menu of like options that you can choose from. To choose from those, you then have to tap the other shoulder button to cycle through them. Now, while you're doing this, to be fair, everything doesn't pause, but it goes into extreme slow motion. But still, like there are some times where the aliens just barge out of a door right next to you and they just attack you, and there's nothing you can do. And the combat is so freaking clunky, it's just a disaster. So you're like, oh my God, they just barged out of this door. Now I'm trying to hold R2 and I'm trying to cycle through the things and get to the exact thing I want and then hit X. And that's where the PlayStation version would just ignore your commands and not fire the weapon. It fires the weapon, I don't know, 60% of the time when it's supposed to. I was like, what the hell is this? So the game is hard as nails, not in the way that XCOM is, where you're right.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, okay, this unit can move 15 grid marks or whatever. There's no grid in this. Like, you can move your party as much as you want, as far as you can go with the cursor. You can tap it, and then if you double tap it, they'll actually run to that point. But if they get scared, and they get scared all the time in this, they won't run. They'll like walk like real slow. So you have to go back, stop them, select that unit that is scared, use like the anti-anxiety medication on them or whatever, but maybe you run out. And that's the other thing, like, that you find in this is like every time you go to use something, you don't have it. Like, you're always running out of ammo. You're always running out of grenades. You're always running out of medical kits. And so a lot of times, like somebody faints or whatever, you don't have the stuff to revive them. You just leave them there. And you can come back later. Like, the one thing I will say is the world is like open world and alive. So it does remember like the stuff that you did or didn't do. So you can come back and try to rescue them. Or in some cases, like, you just are getting bombarded and you just get to an elevator and just freaking leave. You can come back and also try to mop up the mission objectives you didn't accomplish when you were there before, but the aliens are more difficult and smarter when you go back. So it's this cost-benefit analysis. In the game, like, after you get past the first 3 or 4 hours, I thought the game just became almost impossibly hard, where you're just fighting with the controls or whether the inputs are going to actually work or not. Like, there's just some times where they're just like, you know what? We're just going to send 5 aliens at you. Good luck. And like, you lose half your squad, and then one alien comes, and that's enough to kill like half your squad. I just died over and over again. Couple that with the fact that it wasn't accepting my inputs in a lot of cases for the controls. And I was like, what the hell? This game is driving me nuts. But what kept me playing was the story is pretty good. Like, again, like, they cover stuff that, like, there's a little bit of it in like Prometheus with like the cult and this other like society and culture or whatever. But most alien games and movies don't really cover anything like that. But this does. There's like a cult that worships the aliens, and the aliens have learned that, like, oh, they're helping us. They don't attack them. And they have this symbiotic like relationship between the two. Like, the story I found was pretty interesting. I thought the tension was good. Half of it was because the controls don't work. But I did feel like I was constantly on edge while playing the game, not knowing where the aliens were coming from, not knowing where to expect an attack from. But ultimately, it became very frustrating. But what saved it to me was the other part of XCOM that I really love, which is like building up the base and building up this army of people that when your guys do die or you do have to leave them behind, you can roll somebody else right into their place. And again, that's something that this game does better than XCOM, is that mid-mission, you can actually bring people back into bring people into the fight to replace people who have died. So that does help a little bit, but you have to get back to the APC to do that, which is almost impossible sometimes. So a lot of the game is like, survive as long as you can, and then run like hell to an elevator, and and hope that you get back with 3 of your 4 people left, and then replace one of those people, the person that died, with someone who's been sitting on your bench waiting to become a part of your team. So it has some of the best parts of XCOM, which is what kept me playing it. But where it deviates from XCOM is where I feel like it falls on its face. Like, I would much rather have the grid-based strategy RPG gameplay. It's more mathematical. It's more strategic. Like, the way you get screwed in XCOM is like, I have this weapon that are telling me it has a 95% hit rate, and I really need this hit to land, and you hit the 5% and it doesn't land. That's where XCOM gets really frustrating and pisses you off. All the combat in this is frustrating and pisses you off. Like, I never felt like I got better at it. Like, they do eventually like give you turrets, and they give you like these gadgets that make like walls of flame, so you can basically like block off areas from the aliens. So you can get a little bit strategic with that. And if you set up a turret right next to one of the choke points, it can wipe out like 2 or 3 of the xenomorphs before they get to your squad. So they do give you tools eventually that should make it a little easier. But then the enemies become smarter and faster and bigger and more deadly. And so it just feels like a wash. It's a little bit like Final Fantasy 15. I never felt like I became more powerful playing through the game. Yeah, like I don't know. It had been a while since I had played an XCOM game, to be honest. It's probably been like 3 or 4 years. I thought I was ready for it, but then unfortunately, the tweaks that they had made to that formula for this made me not like it.
Yeah, it's. I remember hearing about it, hearing it was kind of an XCOM-ish type game, and that did not appeal to me. I mean, the Aliens franchise isn't, I think, the best to move over to this.
But you would think like Aliens should make great video games. Why do we not have just like dozens of awesome Aliens video games?
The thing is, has there ever been a game like this type of treatment to Aliens?
No.
See, I had this funny memory. We're talking ancient history. Mm-hmm. It was like a Judges Week up in San Francisco, and Sega announced this was like the beginning. This is when like the Gearbox Aliens game was announced.
Colonial Marines.
Yeah, but it was part of a lot of different treatments of Aliens games.
Well, actually, you are playing as the Colonial Marines in this game.
Yeah, I think this might be an ancient. This has probably been gone through so many different hands. Possible. Something that was out there. But moreover, it's that XCOM works because it was made so well. Like the controls, it works being so hard because everything makes sense. Mm-hmm. And you can play it so that when it gets really hard, you kind of go, that was my fault, actually.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I'm going to have this many chrysalids that I got to fight through, late in it. But it's like,
that happens in this game. Like, you just get bombarded. I almost like put the controller down sometimes. I'm like, I'm just going to die. And you just put the controller down, watch them wipe out your squad.
This just sounds like a weird hybrid. It's trying so hard to not be XCOM that it underserves its player.
That it's worse for it. Yeah, you're right. That's a good way to put it.
This kind of confirms all of my suspicions upon hearing about it.
Yeah. Now I will say this: if you are a big Aliens fan, and I'm an Aliens fan, but not like crazy Aliens fan, if you are one of those people, bump it up a little bit because it does do a good job of handling the IP, to be fair, like better than most Aliens games in the past. Like there are just like little moments where you can figure out that they get it. Like, for example, if you kill one of the xenomorphs too close to you, like they'll dissolve in a puddle of acid. And if your party's in the acid, it'll start to burn them and you got to get them out and you have to heal them from the burns. There are face huggers that if they jump on your party and they're on there long enough, they will turn your team into xenomorphs. They will, if you leave, you're a down party member too long, an alien will come along and drag them away and turn them into an alien. So there's some little touches in it that I'm like, ooh, that's kind of cool. And if I were a big Aliens person, like I would think that that's more than a little cool. That's really freaking awesome. So there are touches like that. But again, just don't buy it on PlayStation. Who knows if they couldn't figure out how to keep like the lack of inputs working? Like I'd wonder if they'll ever fix it. Like, I don't know how you can't figure that part out. Like, before the game is launched.
Who's the publisher?
It's Focus Interactive, I believe.
Okay.
I think it is. It's one of those like mid-tier, like B-level publishers. Not quite an indie, not quite a AAA guy. And the game is $40, which is a little steep. It's available for PC, PS4, PS5, Xbox Series, and Xbox One. But it's not really like a looker. Like, it's one of those games that the closer you get to everything, the worse it looks because it's an isometric game. So most of it is played from like sky high. And the other thing too is that presents problems sometimes because you can't, the way the transparencies work, you can't see around and behind stuff at times. So say you want to set up like one of the choke points I was talking about earlier and you think, oh, you look really quickly. You're like, oh, that's a good spot. Then you get there and you realize that it's actually not a choke point because you couldn't see it. Another problem I have is that the map that's on screen doesn't rotate with the world. So if you move the camera around, that map stays static. So you're like, oh, you're looking on the map. You're like, there's a place, the quest marker's over here. So you're on the screen like, I need to go here. Oh, no, actually, you're facing like upside down.
I'm sorry. That is...
horrifying.
That's a capital offense as far as I'm concerned.
It's awful. I was like, this is the dumbest thing. I went in the options. I could not find a way to turn it off or to set the map up so that it followed what was happening on screen. There's just little stuff like that that are just quality of life nightmares, basically, that just turn me off to this game. And I do think if you're a big Aliens fan and maybe also a big XCOM fan, you might be willing to fight through this stuff more than I did. But $40 to me is way too steep.
This does not sound like time well spent.
It just, I didn't have fun with it. And it's like, at that point, it's like, we played this stuff for entertainment. We don't play it to like fight through it, which is a big argument I have against, playing games like Dark Souls. It's like, it's just annoying and it makes me angry. Why am I doing this? Like, why would I want to play this? I totally can accept that you love it and it's your thing. It's not mine. And I don't think anything is ever going to change that. Like Elden Ring didn't change that. I played Elden Ring.
If Elden Ring doesn't change it, it's not going to change.
I played it a lot longer than I had ever played a From Software game. But still, after like 15 or 20 hours, I was like, fuck this game. Like, I don't care. Like, I just started watching YouTube videos. I'll go watch all the bosses on YouTube or whatever. So, like, if Elden Ring didn't change my mind on that, it's not going to change here. So, again, Aliens Dark Descent, it is an isometric, real-time strategy action game with a decent story that handles the Aliens IP pretty well. So I would bump it up if you're a fan, but for everybody else, if maybe you're just an XCOM fan, you're looking for that.
I'm a fan of both. There's no way I'm going to touch this game.
Yeah. I mean, and I would say also too, like, if you're maybe on the fence and thinking about it, like, I would wait till like $20 to buy this. That's the most I would spend on this game. So I think they have something there. Like, I do feel like if they made a sequel, it might be a lot better. It might be something that I actually enjoyed, because I should like this, Adam. I love XCOM and I like Aliens.
I feel like this game sounds more and more like it was a contract that had to be fulfilled and this thing got released.
Like they had the license and like
they had the license. This thing had been worked on for so long that I don't think we'll ever see anything like this again. Disney owns the license now, and so that's why I think there was a pre-existing
you may be right.
something.
That could be that they need to get this out maybe before the end of the year or whatever. Who knows? But this studio has something there. It's just not quite polished enough to make it happen. So that's a big pass for me on Aliens Dark Descent. All right, next up, we're going to talk about actually a game that I think both Adam and I might organically have interest in because we both really like the genre. And that is a competitive 4-on-4 3D platformer called Crash Team Rumble. Adam, have you heard about this game?
I've heard, and obviously Crash, we're talking about Crash Bandicoot.
Yep. It's set in the
multiplayer Rumble, like the Rumble Pack on the N64.
Yeah. Yes, you're connecting all the dots, Adam Sessler. This is basically a team-based 3D platformer set in the Crash universe. And really the objective is there's 10 different maps that you can play on, and there's a base on one end, a base on the other end, and in between there's all these 3D platformy levels, and there's Wumba Fruit, which are the collectibles in the Crash Bandicoot franchise. And you go out, you collect fruit, and the objective is to take the fruit back to your base and then score those. So you need to stand on your pad for like 5 or 10 seconds or whatever, and then it counts the Wumba Fruit and it adds it to your score. The first team to get to 2,000 Wumba Fruit wins the game. Now, there are tons of like caveats and twists to make it better than what that simple concept sounds like. You pick from various characters in the Crash Bandicoot universe. I would argue that there needs to be a lot more because there's only like 8. But I start thinking about it and I'm like, are there more than 8 characters in the Crash Bandicoot franchise? Like, it's
I
not
was
like
to say the Crash Bandicoot universe is that universe is doing a lot more lifting there.
It's no Mushroom Kingdom. I'll just put it to you that way. So there are 8 selectable characters, and they're split into like 3 different classes. There's like the scorer, like the blocker, and the defender or whatever. So like Crash is the scorer. He can move faster than the other guys. It just basically goes down. So the scorers run the fastest, the defenders are the slowest, but they can take the most damage. Fair video game tropes. So talking about like, oh, do they have 8 characters? These are the characters that are in it. There's Crash, there's Tawna, there's Cat Bat, there's Dingo Dial, there's Dr. Embryo, Dr. Entropy, Coco, and Dr. Neo Cortex, who is obviously the villain in the Crash Bandicoot franchise for years and years now. And those are the characters that you can choose from. And of those, I probably know 3 or 4. So I almost got to half of them, Adam. I don't know about you, how many of those characters that you recognize, but
I know Crash Bandicoot. That is it.
Yeah. So anyway, the objective is you go out on the maps, you collect the Wumpa fruit, you're trying to score, but you're also trying to keep the other team from scoring. And so before you begin each match, you choose your character, but then you also choose a special. And the specials will work for any characters. When you first start playing it, you can choose from like 2. And like the one that you can unlock right at the beginning is like a piranha plant that's a turret. So obviously in a game like this, that's very important because you can either put the turret by your base to keep people from keeping you from scoring, or put it by the enemy's base to keep them from scoring. So there's some strategy in how you use them. And then like one of the other power-ups is a refrigerator that you can plop down that heals you. So if you're one of the blockers, you're the person trying to keep the other team from scoring, you just camp out at their base, put the refrigerator down, and as they're attacking, your health is continually being regenerated. So again, more strategy to the game than you might expect. So as I said, there are 10 different maps, and they're all pulled from the games. I've really struggled to find a bad map in this. They're not all symmetrical, and I would argue that they probably need to be for competitive reasons, but most of them are. I think 7 of the 10 are basically perfectly symmetrical. The other ones will just have kind of little offshoots that you can go to. And the reason that they have like these different areas is because there's some twist to how the game works. So there are pads located throughout each level. And after you go around and you collect these keys, so you collect Wumpa fruit and you collect keys. What you're collecting the keys for is you go and you stand on these pads, and each power-up needs a specific number of keys captured to it. So like one of the very simple ones is a beach ball. There's like a beach map or whatever. And it's a pad where you can turn into a beach ball. And once you do, you can move really quickly. You can knock the enemies over, blah, blah, blah. Those are simple. So you need to like secure like 3 or 4 keys to unlock that. So you collect the 3 or 4 keys, you stand on the pad, it syncs it with the pad, and then you turn into the ball and off you go. For some of the bigger ones, and there's some crazy ones that can actually like turn the tide of the game. Like one of them is like this crazy like spiked cage that you get into that would totally not be out of place in like Twisted Metal or something like that. And that's the thing that throw in the wild card into the matches, are these pads that give you these different power-ups. Now, there's also these other pads that you can find. If you turn them all your color and you hold them for like 10 seconds or whatever, it gives you a multiplier on your capture pad. So say you have 20 Wumba fruit that you've collected, and you go back to your pad to cash them in. If somebody has set up those 3 pads, and if the counter is tacked down, it will double what your score. So if you have 20, when you capture them, you actually end up with 40. So there's all these little elements of the game that actually adds a good bit of strategy to it, ultimately. The problem that I've run into playing this game, and I'll be honest with you, I'll be honest with you, Adam, I had way more fun playing this game than I ever dreamed I would have. I am a fan of 3D platformers like you are.
Yeah.
The platforming, the skill in platforming isn't that important, because the other thing too is you can attack each other. So Crash has his spinning attack. He can do like a slide attack. Like some of the bigger ones, the one guy has like a big vacuum where he can suck up Wumpa fruit, but he has this big like tailspin that he does. And then some of the specials are like, here's this gigantic dude that you can just plop down, and people who have him and have unlocked him will just go to your base and just put this gigantic enemy down on your base. Like, it's not fair is what I'm getting at. Like, people who have been playing it longer have a huge advantage because the specials aren't balanced. It's like you can have this big dude sitting on someone's pad, or you can have a refrigerator that recovers your health. Like, does that sound fair to you? I had a lot of fun playing this. I stuck with it way longer than I probably should have, because every game is a blowout. I have played probably 50 matches of this game, and there was one close game, Adam, in all of them. And the reason why, like, after you play it for a while, you start to figure out the people who play it very well and have played it a lot, they can just lock down your base and you can't get anywhere near it. Anywhere near it. I can't tell you how many times I played this game and my team just gave up. And there's no way to surrender. So your team can't be like I said, it's the first team to 2,000 Wumba fruit that wins. There have been games where it's like 1,800 to 175. And you're just like, what am I doing? There were times where I just went and hid. I'm like, I'll just go hide until they finally hit 2,000, because there's no way to surrender in the game. And there's no way to turn the tide to come back that much.
Well, this sounds really bad, because I'm going to assume that this skews younger, or at least it's going to be appealing to younger players. And that's not good if you can't throw in the towel. Like, I can just see what happens between 10-year-olds in a situation like this.
The other thing too is the tutorials for this they're almost too long that you almost check out after a while and stop paying attention. And there's all this little nuance to the game that if you're not doing it, if you're not capturing those pads and getting the multiplayer on your capture base, if you're not taking the keys to these pads and turning into the crazy spiked wheel that you can run over people and get to the other base really, if you're not doing that, you have no chance to win. In fact, if you have one person on your team who's not getting that, you have really no chance to win. So every match was lopsided. It got to the point where half of the games, we couldn't even get near our capture pad because the other team was so good at defending it. And the games would just drag on forever because they're well, it may take us a long time to get to 2,000 Wumba Fruit, but you're not going to score any. So we're going to get to this 2,000. And you're going to end up with 0. And that's the way a lot of the matches ultimately played out. And the other thing about it too, and it's a shame because again, you can see there's something really fun here. And it's something unique that I've never played before. It's like Smash Brothers in an open world, I guess is a better way to put it. With some caveats and some things that should be there to help turn the tide of the game. But the other thing about it is this game costs $35 and it's available for both PlayStations and both Xboxes. No PC and no Switch yet. It costs $35, but it has a season pass. And as you play, you earn points, just generic XP or whatever. And basically after every match, you do get a new cosmetic, a hat or a pair of shoes or a backpack. Who really cares about that crap? What you really care about is unlocking the new playable characters because they do matter because they have special abilities and unlocking the new specials so that you can get that giant that you can drop down on their pad so that they can't flip and score. Those are the things that matter. And those unlock so slow. And so I don't know about you, Adam. To me, any game that I pay money for that has a battle pass in it, that's a big why? Make it free to play. This game, I'll say this. If this game were free to play, and they tuned it up, because tuning isn't that tough, Adam. You just go in and tweak some values in the algorithms and whatever, and you could generally get the game to a pretty good place where it plays well. This game could be huge. It already is huge. I am shocked at how many people are playing this game. There's no problems getting games. I thought I was going to start this game and I would sit there for 15 minutes waiting for a match. Nope, it's like that because
and this is Activision.
It is, yeah, because it's also cross-platform. So you're playing with people on both PlayStations, you're playing with people on both Xboxes, and from all those communities, that's enough people to always have matches. You don't have to wait at all for matchmaking. So the game is huge. But it could be gigantic if they made it free to play, or if they just got rid of the stupid Battle Pass crap and just gave you what you paid for. I paid for this, Adam. Well, I didn't.
This is why
code, but
this is why Microsoft needs to buy Activision.
I think if Microsoft buys Activision, you'll never see games like this. And I do have to wonder if this was a smart idea to make and release this game. It is, for the most part, it is very polished, and again, it plays unlike anything else. I've never played a game like it before, and I have a lot of fun with it. But after a while, it's a competitive game where you can't compete. Either I was on a team that blew out the other team, or I was on the team that got blown out. There was never even close. I never even got to the point where I was like, "Holy crap, man! We actually we're only down 200 Wumba Fruit. We have a chance to come back and win this thing." None of that ever happens. Within 5 minutes of every match, it's too late. It's over. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here. I think there's an idea here for sure that could be huge. A game like this set in the Mushroom Kingdom could be amazing. Where you have all those moves and stuff like that. It could be a blast. But set in the Crash Bandicoot, it's just too limited in characters that I care about, in moves and abilities that I care about, in settings that are immediately recognizable. Most of the maps are, they are pulled from Crash Bandicoot, but they're really just generic snow level, generic jungle level. I didn't play any stage on this and I was like, that's level 5-2 from Crash Bandicoot 2. That doesn't happen in this game. Everything just feels very generic.
Are there hardcore Crash fans?
I don't think so. I think back in the day there was, because PlayStation positioned him as the anti-Mario guy.
Yeah, I remember that.
But I think once he went multi-platform, I think all of that just disappeared. Because remember, in the GameCube era, then they started releasing it for everything, and I think he just lost his allure as a PlayStation mascot at that point. So But again, this isn't available for Switch yet. It should have probably been the first platform that they made it for. Like, I mean, this matches the Switch audience way more than like PlayStation or Xbox. Let's just be honest, but they haven't. So I don't know. It was a grind to unlock the new characters and the specials, and that's what you really need to be more competitive at the game. The games were always blowouts. I do feel like there's simple changes that they can make to this to make it better and make it really like a big hit, honestly. Like I was pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed what I was doing. It was just the outcome. It
just wasn't a good competitive game.
Yeah, and I'm a competitor, Adam. You know that.
I know that about you.
Like, I'm the guy, like, you tell me who we need to beat, and you point me in that direction, and I run after them. That's me. And I've never denied that. I've always been that way. It can be an asset sometimes. It can be a pain in the ass sometimes. But for video games, I'm very competitive. And like when I felt like I did not have the ability to compete, that's when it was all over for me with this game. So I do wonder if I check back in a month or two and they've had some time to kind of tweak things and look at a lot of the data that they're getting, if it's a much better experience then, or if they start dropping like how long it takes to unlock the stuff that really matters in the game, then it could turn around very quickly as well. But as it sits right now, that's a hard pass, like particularly at $35 for a game that should be free to play. I also have a feeling within a few months, this game will be turned into a free to play game. It's a little shady to me that they try to like milk Crash fans for $35.
What? Children? Activision? Shady? No, not in the least. No.
Yeah. And then another thing too that's a little weird about it is that like it's a grind to unlock stuff, but this isn't the type of game like Call of Duty or Mario Kart where you come home from work every night and you sit down and play it for 2 or 3 hours. It's just not one of those games. So you're not constantly going to be grinding, trying to unlock stuff. You're going to play it like on Tuesday and then not play it again until Saturday or Sunday. And like, it just feels like a lot of the stuff in this game was misguided along the lines of its framework. The actual nuts and bolts of the game itself, they're cool and they're fun. It just, they need to tweak some of the algorithms and they need to tweak some of the rewards and the pacing, and they need to completely ditch the stupid battle pass. There should never be a battle pass in a game that you pay for. I hate it in Call of Duty too. I think it's complete garbage that like every season you start over at 0. It's like, no, I paid $70 for this game. Give me that assault rifle. Like I shouldn't have to play it for another 40 hours to get the stupid ass gun. Like, so I apply it equally across all games. Any game I pay for should never have a battle pass. That's how I feel about it. I don't think that's a polarizing view, honestly. How do you feel about battle passes, Adam?
I don't. Do I play games?
Do you play any games with battle passes?
Does Destiny 2 have that?
Yeah.
All right. I mean, that's the one that I tend to play. I think Diablo actually is going to have something like that. I think they're going to reset after the season. I don't know how long the season is.
Yeah.
But I tend not to gravitate towards games that would have one. So, yeah, your logic is if you're paying for the game, it's probably the easiest way to generate revenue for a game as a service. Mm-hmm. But I like the idea that free to play with Battle Pass makes way more sense.
Yeah. What about just paying for games as a service, period?
It's really...
Because PlayStation is going to be asking us to do that big time here over the next, like, 3 years.
I think you're right. It really depends what I get in return. The problem is a lot of these games, Destiny 2 being, I think, one of the best examples, where 3 years in, or 4 years, and whatever it's been, it suddenly became the game everyone thought it was supposed to be at launch. And at that point, you're like, oh... I get it. You can ask more of me now, and I get it. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of like with hopes and dreams in the beginning. That's where I think it gets tricky. But these games take forever to make, and at some point, the money has to, there has to be that return.
Do you think these games as a service are going to fly for PlayStation? Marathon and Helldivers and Fair Games. How are those going to go over? It seems like the fans are already like, F you.
I know Sony's about to understand that, like they're they stoke those crazy PlayStation fanboys, and I don't think they've ever fully understood those crazy PlayStation fanboys.
Yeah,
and I think they're going to bite back. I would like them to cut them loose. That the game industry needs to stop leaning on them to begin with. Sony
they started to wean off of that audience.
Yeah, Sony I think stokes them the most, and I think there might be some bite back. Microsoft, I think, has done a very good job of just trying to create a market that does not rely upon those crazies.
I do wonder too, like, what other IP is there for PlayStation on PS5 at this point? So people are complaining, like, oh, all these games they showed, they're all these games as a service games. I don't care about those. People have already moved on from those games and rejected that.
Oh my God!
But then I start thinking about it, and I'm like,
the PlayStation fanboy who really is like a focus group of one.
Yeah,
like these people do not have any contextual experience in life.
Yeah.
I looked at that data, and it's like Sony needs games like that. They need that kind of base. They're going to get. I mean, Destiny's well established. I have faith in Bungie because they've worked so hard to get to where they are. They know the alchemy almost. I don't know who might know it better. Some elements of Blizzard, I think, has that. New IP, that's I think Sony's biggest challenge. Like Ghost of Tsushima was a real lucky blow for them.
Yeah.
They struggle with a lot of new IP.
But it's like, so what IP is there though, is my question. So people are like, these games as a service games suck. I don't care about them. I don't want to play them. I want big Sony quadruple A.
It takes 7 years to make those games.
But it's not even about that. It's like, okay, what? Killzone?
Yeah.
SOCOM? Like, what's left, Adam? That's my question.
Well, it's also
Bloodborne. Okay, I'll give you Bloodborne too.
People need to figure out also what Sony makes money. Sony doesn't make money on those wonderful games they make. Like their
well, I mean, they turn a nice profit on the God of War stuff. Like 5 or 6 years
late down the road.
I mean, you have to sell 10 million at least to turn a profit.
But I mean, Sony's margins are not pretty. This is my this goes back to what I was saying earlier. Microsoft can be very successful without being number one.
Yeah.
And
it's third, and it's still
Sony
surviving.
Can have really nasty numbers and be number one. And the thing is, they've curried this sense of being so prestige, so HBO about what they do. But once again, push is going to come to shove, and for them to actually make money, they're going to have to really alienate and disappoint, the drooling lunatics that make up the Sony fan base.
I think what we're realizing is that for a long time, Sony skirted along by securing exclusive third-party games.
Oh yeah,
it wasn't its exclusives; it was third-party, and now that has dried up, and so its whole business strategy has kind of collapsed. It's like, now you need to make a SOCOM game that's going to sell 15 or 18 million copies. You need to make a Killzone game that's going to sell 15 to 18 million copies. You can't. Nobody cares about that IP because you used to get Tekken exclusively all the time. That doesn't happen anymore.
That's right.
Like there used to be all these third-party franchises that would just bend the knee to PlayStation and be like, sure, at the very least, we'll give it to you for a year. I mean, they still got Final Fantasy somehow. I don't know what Square Enix is taking.
Because I don't think Final Fantasy is as strong a brand as it once was.
Yeah.
That, I mean, it would have been good for Microsoft to have it, but I don't think it's game-changing.
Well, I mean,
not like Call of Duty. Call of Duty is very important. You're right. Back when Sony, excuse me, I'm going to just wipe my eye there.
Sure.
When Sony was making its arguments about how bad the acquisition of Call of Duty was going to be for Sony, Sony was also kind of saying, we suck.
Yeah, they were. They were basically admitting that we
and I was really shocked that they were saying something like that. PlayStation was saying,
we can't make a good shooter.
Well, but they're also saying, we don't have a franchise. We don't own anything at the juggernaut level.
Well, look, they tried with Resistance. They saw what Call of Duty was becoming, and they're like, okay.
But it just wasn't. I mean, it's just
they're like, we're
going to
put one of our best second-party studios on a shooter, and they put Insomniac on it, and Insomniac couldn't make a shooter that could compete either. So
because also Call of Duty is, I don't understand the appeal of Call of Duty, but it's. I mean, I don't understand the longevity.
It's the most accessible shooter.
Yeah.
Everybody can pick it up and
people
play
do it. It's almost like people aren't trying to reinvent basketball every year.
Right. It has become a sport.
Taken on that particular type of role. That's really the strongest argument Sony has, but they're just saying that they're not good enough to be able to finance or something of that nature. It's interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, there you go. I don't know how we got on that tangent from Crash Team Rumble.
Well, you know what? Because Crash Team Rumble only offers up that much.
But see, that used to also be a PlayStation exclusive as well.
Oh, yeah.
Like PlayStation used to get all these exclusives. Like And that was a first party
it
when
was
it leaked
exclusive before they owned Naughty Dog.
Right.
There's the real irony.
How bizarre is that, by the way? Naughty Dog sells it off to Universal, and now PlayStation owns Naughty Dog, and it doesn't own Crash Bandicoot anymore. Anyway.
But making a game that only the oldest among us, which is you and me, can see the what is still Crash Bandicoot in that.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. Yep. So anyway, there you go. That's Crash Team Rumble. I do not recommend buying it at all, and I have a feeling in the next couple of months it will be free to play and will be tweaked. And by then, I will recommend that all of you guys give it a go because they do have something there. It's just not quite there. Next up, we're gonna finally allow Adam to talk about some games that he's been playing. It's been all me on this episode, me blathering on. And you guys, once you showed up and you knew Adam was here, you guys want to hear from Adam, and I do too. So I asked Adam, a couple games that he's been playing recently that he'd like to talk about, and no surprise, the two games that he wanted to discuss were The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom and Diablo 4. So let's start with Tears of the Kingdom, Adam. Yep. I think we've already established through the episode that you like Tears of the Kingdom at least a little bit more than I do.
Yeah. I like it. I'm enjoying it. I go back to it every day. I think about it a fair amount when I'm not playing it, which is an interesting thing.
I mean, that's generally the sign of a pretty good game.
Yeah. But having said that, I really didn't like Breath of the Wild. Like
you didn't like it at all?
No, the way I described it is it's easy to admire and almost impossible to enjoy. It was
that's a good way to describe it.
That what
I feel the same way about Tears of the Kingdom, honestly.
Yeah, that I understand. It's so neat that they were able to pull off the way that with only these simple skills, how it's so applicable throughout the world. Mm-hmm. But it just, I was like, okay, but I don't know.
I found a lot of it annoying, and I'll say
I found it very annoying.
Tears of the Kingdom does fix a lot of the really annoying parts of Breath of the Wild, for sure.
The way I like to describe Tears of the Kingdom is I find that the game's goals and my goals are now one and the same. Whereas I felt like what Breath of the Wild wanted me to get out of it and what I wanted to get out of it were like that.
Okay.
Here, I feel like I can always engage in some type of quest and I'm getting the best that the game has to offer. Mm-hmm. Whereas like in Tears of the Kingdom, I kept on feeling like, okay, the good part's hidden from me. I'm sorry, in Breath of the Wild, I always felt like I need to be wandering because that's where the fun will suddenly emerge. Here, I'm like, okay, you're pushing me into new areas as I do things. I like that.
How did you like the building stuff in Breath of the Wild, where it was more almost archaic and almost felt like an accident? Versus the building stuff now in Tears of the Kingdom.
Well, obviously, because the building seems to be aimed towards a purpose, but also it's not, I have to build something so complex. I mean, when I heard about building, I was like, oh God, I may never play this game. Because I think of some of the strange opacity of some of the shrines in Breath of the Wild. I'm like, and now I have to build things to be able to solve that. Like, I'll never second guess the puzzle designer's wisdom with that. I was completely wrong. I mean, pretty much building a bridge solves all problems. But if you want to have fun with it, the fun is there. And I'm like, that was the right balance.
So that's my question for you. Do you have fun with it? Because I found myself building the ramp.
I barely build. But, I love helping the dude with the sign.
No, yeah. Because they're very simple. And you can do those in like a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm kind of thinking, doing a physics puzzle, an interesting physics problem that changes just a little bit from each instance. And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, I get it. It
flexes the same part of your brain with a much smaller commitment.
And it helps. It's almost like it's good exercise for some of the shrine puzzles where the physics gets more complex. And
or the few times where they do require that you build something more complex. Yeah, they don't do it all that often, but they do it every once in a while.
Yeah, and but I'm also, as I mentioned earlier, I play it 3 hours a day at most.
Wow, that's a lot though.
Yeah, I've had a couple aberration days where I go deep in it, and I don't feel an urge to have to finish it, and that's where it gets different for me, with the so many things that annoy me in games, and God, there were things that I hated in Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
But also, I felt like I needed to finish that game to get onto another game, to get onto another game. That does amplify those things. Here, I'm a lot more sanguine about stuff.
Yeah, because you don't have to worry about playing another game to talk about it on next week's podcast or whatever.
But I also don't feel that I never got anything done during my play session. That like shrines are finished in a good amount of time.
Yeah,
like a challenge and then it's over. Because God, I still remember some of the shrines from Breath of the Wild, where I was like, what stupid laboratory did you come up with? I mean, it was just like, I
feel like that was some of the shrines in Tears of the Kingdom too. Like, I wonder how much people would like this game if they weren't able to cheat by going online and looking at the solutions to some of these things.
I've looked, I think, twice.
Really?
So far. Yeah, and I'm about 65 in. And I have no compunction about checking.
Wow. After I played it to talk about it on GameFace, I didn't go for help at all before I talked about it on GameFace. Yeah. And after that, I was like, okay, I want to just try to play this game for enjoyment. Dude, I did not give a crap if I went and looked at guides. Like, if I got to the point where I'd fiddled around with everything for like 10 minutes or whatever, and then I would go and like read the solution, and I'm like, who in the hell would ever think to do that? Like,
it might be that I haven't found those shrines yet. I have not gone to look for a shrine that wasn't right in front of me, or that I couldn't see from a hilltop. Though
how far along are you? How many of the beasts have you felled?
Beasts?
Yeah, well, like the big bosses that you fight.
Oh, only one. But
okay. You're still very early in the game.
Well, but I decided I wanted to do one type of side quest first.
Okay.
I have unlocked every tower, and I have gone to. I wanted to do the Lucky Clover. So I've been to every single the stables, because it's later in the game where I don't feel like new stuff. You know, earlier on, I'm happy to do the exploring, discover things, open up the map, get your travel points. That way you can start to.
It makes everything else easier for sure.
Yeah. And so I also noticed with the Lucky Clover thing, it was a good way to get introduced into certain facets of the game.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay.
Did your horses work? Were your horses from Breath of the Wild in the stable?
No.
Mine either.
The horses are crap.
I even went in and checked and made sure my save was on my Switch. And it was
those got imported. I just think the horses are useless.
My horse is never imported for some reason. It's weird.
I changed switches and I made sure I downloaded the save. I
did too, and it didn't matter. My horses never showed up. But you're right; they don't matter. So
yeah, they really don't matter.
Particularly after you've unlocked like all the towers and you can just fast travel everywhere.
Yeah, it's and also they don't go fast enough, and once you finally get them fast, they don't turn.
Right.
It's like, yes.
Even after you've trained them, like they still don't turn right.
Yeah. The part that really does frustrate me is, once again, it's still opacity in the game. It's like, why can't you make the side quests more obvious?
Yeah.
How many side quests do you find? And you have to read through some of the most tedious dialogue to get a hint at where to go. And it's like, come on, that's where I'm going online for. It's like, I don't feel like, I hate the cutesy dialogue. Like, God, there's one thing Nintendo they gotta get off its own dick. Like, it is not that clever.
But this game also goes back to like, who are you making the games for? Should you make him for the 11-year-old?
Well, see, I have an 11-year-old godson who's very relevant for Diablo 4. He's always coming over to my place so we can play Diablo. And he's playing Breath of the Wild too. And when one of us is boring the other, we call him a blood moon.
Oh.
Because then we just go, it's a blood moon. Everything is hard. It's like, it's like, Nintendo is so enamored of itself and its dialogue, and it so wants to maintain the integrity of a world that, let's be honest, this world is filled with idiots that don't deserve saving. Okay, no one in this world can take care of themselves.
You're right.
They should be left on the side of the road to starve to death and rebuild from scratch.
Yeah,
but it's like, just tell. I would like to do the side quest. Why are you hiding the side quest behind clues that don't make any sense?
Yeah.
And it just, once again, I can solve it by going online, fine. But like the tedious dialogue and those things, it's like, I'm not paying attention. And look, most Zelda stories can just just twiddle off.
Yeah.
This one just strikes me as like among one of the most tedious.
Well, Breath
like,
of the Wild didn't
have
even
to
really
talk
have a
slow?
story. At least this one kind of has one.
It does, but everyone is talking so slow and important. We're an ancient race, so we have time to talk. Like, no, oh God, it's
right.
so annoying.
Okay, so you talked about things that bother you about it, but you really like the game. So tell me the things. Yeah, so tell me the things that you really love about it.
Yeah, I just there's always something to do that I find engaging.
Okay.
Like that's what the first one just didn't have for me. This, it's like I put myself on a quest, just doing all the little things, and I feel that the side quests, especially like the Lucky Clover stuff, it pushes me into parts of the map that I haven't seen before. That was always like when I'm saying like the two are lining up, is that I could either do the quest or explore the map, that the two weren't one and the same. That here, everything I do, I think like, oh, I'm gonna like be able to see the nooks and crannies of this pretty neat looking and well-designed world. And in that regard, that's what I love the most about video games. That's why I always cite Ghosts and Goblins as my favorite game. Is, I wanted to progress in the game, not because I wanted to score or to brag to my friends. I wanted to see what the next level looked like.
Yeah.
And this delivers on that. I also didn't. Breath of the Wild was pretty rudimentary. I felt like, it's hot world, it's cold world, it's here. There's an interesting sense of variety, and
most you're right. There's more gray in Tears of the Kingdom for sure.
Yeah, and the quest, the side quest, once I figure out what to do, feel meaningful. Like everything.
Most of them.
Here, most of them are in the previous game was just like, get me 20 of these, get me this, get me that. I've only run into some of that.
Adam, I am wondering if your strategy, and actually Matt did the same exact thing when he started playing Tears of the Kingdom. He just ignored the quests and just went and unlocked all the towers.
Yeah.
You did the same thing. I am wondering if that might be the ideal way to play, because for me, playing Tears of the Kingdom, it was bouts of the awesome stuff that you talked about that I also really liked, interspersed with like really annoying traversal, getting caught in like the mountain range where you're like climbing up and trying to figure some way to get up this mountain, and all the textures are just repeated over and over and over. And then finally you find a spot like where you get, oh my God, there's civilization again. That happened to me like over and over again, when I would just get lost.
Feels like Skyrim.
Yes, very much like Skyrim. Where I just get lost out into this almost like procedurally generated nothingness. And how do I get through these mountain
That's what the underground is like. And I was struggling with that last night. And I don't think this pitch black thing that is now reliant upon your economy of arrows to be able to illuminate, that seems, it's so cumbersome. I cannot figure out how this was decided that is the right way to go.
Remember Metroid Prime 2 is like that? It had the dark world where you had to find like these little umbrellas to hide underneath for and I hated it for that.
Oh, I mean, it's a really weird decision. I don't really know how much this underground world plays into this.
You don't need to play it that much if you don't want to, honestly.
Yeah, I know that I learned from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on Blue Sky talking about how she finally discovered the auto builder, and that's if you do this one mission down, and that's what I'm.
I didn't discover that either. And Matt was like, "Oh God, you played the whole game without the auto builder," and I was like, "Yeah, I did."
Yeah, so that's what I'm doing right now, and then I'm gonna. Yeah. But I mean.
So wait, AOC gave you a pro tip?
Yeah, I know.
Did that really happen?
Yeah, really did. She didn't give it to me personally. I caught her mention.
She's a pro tip about Zelda.
I saw her on Blue Sky, and she skated that. She's like, oh my God, I just discovered there's an auto builder in Zelda.
You're on Blue Sky?
Yeah.
I just got on. Let's be friends.
Yeah.
I have like no friends on there yet.
Oh yeah, I'm up. I'm on there. Yeah.
I am Shane Satterfield. I got rid of Dinfire for Blue Sky.
Okay.
So
okay. I don't feel like I'm fighting the game. At the end of the day, that's really, and I like almost all the Nintendo games as of late. I feel like I fought Odyssey. I like that hideous Metroid game that all the kids came crying to me about.
Yeah. I think ultimately, though, a lot of those kids wiped their tears away and was like, you know what? Adam was right. I don't think folks, like, now that the dust is settled on that game.
Like Chris Penn in Reservoir Dogs, like, don't point that gun at my dad. I'm like, no, just because it's Nintendo doesn't mean I'm going to go soft on them.
Yeah.
And I remember somebody made the argument to me. It's like, well, they might not make another Metroid game. I'm like, I don't care.
If they play like this, I don't want another
game needs to be called a bad game.
They're not going to cancel Metroid Prime 4. That's not happening. Yeah.
But it works.
You like playing in the sandbox, basically, I guess is what you're getting at.
No, but it's more because I'm doing it at my own pace. If I felt that
you're not the games journalist anymore that needs to finish it and move on.
If there was a sense of urgency with this game, so much more of it would have been annoying me. And when I was reviewing, I always struggled to try to put that side of it. It
is difficult.
It's hard. But I find it very enjoyable. It'll be interesting what happens, I would say, in the next 2 weeks, because I would say in the next 2 weeks, I think I need to see signs that it's going to end.
Well, you've only beaten one of the beasts so far. You got a ways to go.
I mean, the first one, the wind one, like Dorito Village, that was a 2-day effort. At 3 hours a day. It'll probably
to beat the boss or just to finish the whole stage with
the whole stage.
Yeah. It takes a day for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what I'm expecting to do with the other two. I don't know how much further the game goes.
The Gorons, they're maybe a little more than a day, but.
All right.
But you're right. Roughly a day for each one.
Is that the Lady Town or is that the Rock Town?
The Goron's the Rock Town, yeah. Generally, the one you're supposed to go to second, by the way, if you didn't know already.
I found that one so annoying, and
well, you have to get
Breath of the Wild.
You have to have a very specific piece of clothing, or you can't even start it. So
that's what I assume,
and that's part of that annoys me about these games is that like, I am, and
this is what I wanted to get to. Why not just go back to the old style itself?
Yes, that's what I've been saying all along. Why? Like, how do you feel about there being no dungeons in the game?
I mean,
you missed them.
This feels more like a dungeon than Breath of the Wild, I guess. It's more, I mean, also a logical flow of progress. The fun of it was, I think the reason why I call these dungeons is it's testing me on one thing, like wind. It's like, okay, like I gotta think wind. Whereas in Breath of the Wild, it was, here's some shit that we cobbled together in this.
But if you remember the old dungeons, they build on stuff.
And I love that.
You'd finish the first dungeon, you get something at the end of it. Then the next dungeon, the first half of it, you use that thing and you get good at it. And then they start bringing in the other things that you already had. And then that just folds
If they never made this open world Zelda, I don't know if I would be saying, God, I wish there was an open world Zelda. The problem was they did the space of time between Twilight Princess and Birdie one. Which one was that? What was it called?
Skyward Sword.
Skyward Sword. It was too short. And so the similarities between them became so evident. It wasn't that they need to change up the format. They need to change it up a little bit.
Yeah. You don't want to just keep doing the same thing.
But it's like they took that show to heart, spent too long to make something that it's great in theory, it's neat in practice, but it doesn't feel essential.
Yeah.
And like if you took a lot of this extraneous stuff out of it, what you would get in return is, I think you would have more fun, quirky characters. Like, not sort of the story itself, but narrative elements, I think would be a lot more fun because you know when the player is going to find them. When the player can find them at any time, you have to flatline this sense of discovery in the game. And that, it was like the huge problem, say, with the first Assassin's Creed, where you could do anything at any time. Ubisoft went on a tear for 3 years of making the same damn game like that. And it became really clear you can't have dramatic progression if you can do it at any moment.
Yeah. Also, certain ideas, you don't want them every year. Like there needs to be a gap in between them. And I agree with you. The gap between the GameCube stuff and Skyward Sword was way too short. And I didn't really like Skyward Sword anyway. Like I didn't like
no one. I mean, I know everybody is reconsidering games. Everyone's like, Skyward Sword is good and Mario Sunshine is good. No, they're not actually.
Well, I think they are good. They're not great.
Yeah, you're right.
And I expect
within their own, but it's one of those. It's like, no, we can sometimes be right in the past, and it's still right now.
Yeah.
So.
All right, let's talk about Diablo 4. Now,
yeah,
I will admit, I think I'm pretty much at the end of Diablo 4. I got to a boss fight. No, not like, I'm not playing the end game or any of that thing yet. I'm just playing the campaign.
Yeah.
And I got to a boss fight that I just could not beat. Like, I'm playing as a necromancer, and I literally don't think it's possible to beat this boss as a necromancer unless I were to go off and like level up like a million times. Like, I need somebody to come in and co-op this boss with me. And I could never, when I was playing, I could never find anyone to come and help. And we do have like a little, like a sifted clan, like with a bunch of people.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but the timing has just never really worked out where I was like, I need to do this now. And there's somebody waiting in the wings to come and help me. And so I just stopped playing. I quit. And I haven't picked it up now for like 2 weeks, I guess.
Well, I noticed a patch just came through in the last hour. So I don't know. I mean, you're about to hit on one of the most interesting aspects, which is, I think this is the best single player Diablo I've ever seen.
Agreed. Yeah.
But
I've never plowed through a Diablo like this before, ever.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. I'm fascinated. This is one of those rare times I actually do wish I could review a game again because I don't know how to explain why this game is so good. I'm at a loss, but I know
it's also very
good.
Polished as well. Like,
it is so goddamn polished.
It's gigantic, and it's just like careless. Yeah.
It is not a complex combat system.
No.
It is.
And I did get bored too. I found it repetitive after a while, a little bit.
But there's something satisfying
there
about
is.
This. Like you can
the dopamine hit every like 90 seconds. Yeah.
Yeah, there's like where the camera is. It's an archaic presentation.
Yeah.
But it just everything clicks. Like the visuals, the audio. The rate at which I'm just getting a little reward, just seeing a little. But the reason I really wanted to bring this up is I never got to play much co-op, period, any game. Because you're always moving on to the next game. And just as normal people are starting to play something, I'm playing the next thing.
Yep.
And I really wanted to play co-op with this. But to your point, I struggle to find
get people to come in and play.
Yeah, because I like to play with friends. I don't like to play with strangers.
I don't want to play with randoms either. But you can't really call in randoms in this. I don't think you can just call in random people to.
I don't think you can either. But there's one person that I almost have
people
the
will just randomly join up. Like I'll be fighting somebody, some dude will show up and kill like one thing and run off. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But I've been playing with my 11-year-old godson, and this has made the game so much more fun than I could possibly imagine because
one, it becomes personal.
Well, also he's like he just got to the age where he can truly appreciate games. He's been playing them since he was young, but like he now gets into them, but he doesn't understand games writ large,
right?
And so he hasn't truly figured out what the whole gist of Diablo is, which is like it's all about loot,
right?
So when he gets a piece of loot that's better, he is so excited.
Oh, he's still
so
poor.
It's like every 90 seconds I hear this. Oh, I got something that's 134.
I wish I could go back to being that way again.
So much fun. It's like the way I described it to my wife is I'm like, imagine if I was 11 and I found a Playboy every 90 seconds.
That's a good way to put it.
And we were together. The other fun thing is he also has no concept of strategy, and he just runs. He runs through every door that's there.
Is he a barbarian?
He triggers as many enemies as he can inadvertently and sends them right back to me. He's the barbarian, and it's so funny because I will sit with him. I'm like, okay, we're gonna put the souls in this thing. That's gonna unlock the door there. We're not going to run through the door, right? Tell it to me. He goes, we're not going to run through the door. He just hears the door open and Pavlovian instinct kicks in and he runs through the door. It's so much fun.
He can't help himself.
Oh, I know. And it's that's what I'm realizing is the value of having a game that's so simple and traditional in its design is everybody can play it. And I think that's the other reason why so many people are playing this game right now.
Yeah.
And maybe like in lieu of something like Final Fantasy XVI, which is going to have a much narrower appeal, is that you can play with your worst gamer friends on the planet. Yeah. Like everyone kind of has a fair shot in this one. And
it's a pretty simple game. And you never wonder where to go or what to do next. No. The waypoints are great. Like they just
and the storytelling's good.
Yeah,
like compared
way
to
better than it used to be.
Well, compared to Zelda,
Yeah.
Where it's just like, we're gonna talk slow. And here they sound like characters and they get through their dialogue efficiently.
Yeah.
And it's just it is not, I did not think I was going to be playing Diablo 4 this year. I thought like, oh, it would be nice if I can get to it. And then I heard people talking about it. I'm like, okay, I will. Started playing it. And I just like, I have one character for single player and I have one character that I play with. Because I'm the sorcerer. Because I'm like, I'll do the work for you. You think that he's like, I'm not losing any
winning,
health,
but I'm actually doing the winning.
Well, also when you're playing co-op, I guess like when I'm healing, he's healing too. So he never thinks he's actually losing health. So he thinks he's the best player on earth. Right. I'm like, nope, that's me. That's me.
Yeah, but Godfather Adam isn't gonna say
I
that.
love it. I have an absolute blast. But yeah, it's also in terms of playing two games at the same time, Diablo and Zelda kind of are really nice.
I was doing that for a while.
I like
that week. I was going back and forth between the two of them like every 3 hours. It was like it was nice to get a reprieve from both of them at times because Diablo can, if you try to grind through Diablo and you can't play for like 4 hours straight, it can grind you down. Like it is very much because you don't get enough new attacks. It's like you're doing the same pattern over and over. You learn like how long it takes for everything to cool down. You know the exact order that you fire off all your attacks. So that by the time you get to the last one, the first one's, and you're ready to do the next one. It's like, if you do that for like hours straight, after a while, you're like, okay.
And it was never, and that's why single player was never how you're supposed to play it, because you had to do it with friends and have a social aspect. So they're doing more right now that I can go much further solo play than I ever was able to with others. Also, tip of the hat to Rod Ferguson, who I know is aging right in pace with you and me. Playing this with the controller is such a joy, and I can't do mouse and keyboard anymore. Yeah, I know. And I really thought, oh God, will I be able to play it? Because I thought I had to do mouse and keyboard. Oh, I love it with the controller.
Yeah. Well, plus sitting on the couch is great too.
Yeah, that's
instead of sitting in a computer chair. Well, that's great, Adam. Do you think you're going to go and try to give Final Fantasy XVI a go now that we've had a discussion?
I think so. I mean, so my plan, I want to at least get Zelda done. Diablo, I'm just going to dip in and out of for God knows how long. Because the other fun thing about playing with an 11-year-old is I'm like, hey, what's your camp schedule? When can we play again?
Yeah,
it's really weird to try.
Well, we can play. Yeah, we can play together. Like we need to friend up and we need to play. I can bring you in. Maybe I can beat this boss finally.
I'm really low level. I'm still quite early on. I'm like 20, I think.
Okay, I think I'm like 30 or something. I'm not that far away from you. Yeah. So I can carry you for a little bit. I just need a little bit of help. And I think maybe a sorcerer is exactly what I need to beat this boss.
Maybe.
We'll connect. Yeah.
But definitely, I want to play Spider-Man again just for the story. Also, just because I love that first Spider-Man game so much. I want to get ready for Spider-Man 2. And I have to play Alan Wake again ahead of Alan Wake 2. So those are my two kind of like, those are the two other games I have to play this year. And I want to prep for them.
You better do that before October, bro.
Well, I got to do it before September because like I'm making. I told the wife that like pretend I'm not here for a week. I might hire someone to come in and cook.
She's like,
for me.
Adam, I did that for 18 years.
I know. And she realizes
my wife is still doing it, Adam.
And she hates Todd Howard games so much because she loses me. She's like, it's one of his games again.
Yep, that's the way it is. Yep.
So yeah, but if I can fit in Final Fantasy 16, you definitely got me interested. Like this sounds like an interesting one.
I think you should give it a go. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised and then some that it has changed as much as it has. So
cool.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for GameFace episode 348. As I said earlier in the show, please support our sponsor if you can. Head to creamls.com/sifted. Pick up a bottle. You can go to Bevmo. They have links for Bevmo there. You can buy your bottle there. There's also a store locator to tell you where you can get it locally. Again, they are sifters. They are gamers. Support sifters. Support gamers whenever you can. Why would you support some gigantic liquor conglomerate when you can support someone like Adam and I? I mean, it's just that simple. And while you're at it, why don't you go and support people like Adam and I? Head to patreon.com/sifted. That's SIFTD. You can pledge $1 a month, $1 million a month, whatever you want. Every dollar makes a difference for us and helps us keep creating content just like this so we can bring awesome people like Adam Sessler onto our shows. Adam, I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate
my pleasure.
Not been doing this for a while, and you agreed to come on GameFace and talk with us. Always an illuminating conversation. I honestly don't want the show to end, but we've hit the end. Because I could talk with you about games forever.
Oh, I could too.
Which is why
I probably need a hot dog in me.
But thank you so much, Adam.
Oh, my pleasure, man.
I wish we could do this more often. So,
well, maybe after the craziness of the end of the year, we can revisit. I can hop on with Matt as well because I haven't seen him in so long.
Yeah,
and at least assess what the year was like.
Yep.
And you can get it from the perspective of a no longer a professional.
Well, so. you're always going to be a professional, Adam. Let's be honest, bro.
Oh, dear.
I mean, come on.
It's the mark of Cain.
You're like the consummate professional. All right. Well, listen, thanks to everybody for watching. I know this show wasn't live on Twitch. I think hopefully you guys understand why and you think it was worth it. We did miss having you guys because Adam, normally we do like a big Q&A session right now. And I know that our audience would... it would almost be too much.
Probably have a few too many questions as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. And I didn't want to spoil that you were on the show. I could have been like, Adam's coming on. Do you have questions for Adam? But I wanted there to be a surprise.
Yeah,
so
I get it.
But anyway, thank you again for coming on, man.
I
love you like a brother. And
yeah, love you too, man. You take care. Say hi to your wonderful wife.
I will.
And I will talk to you soon.
And where can people find you, Adam? On Twitter and maybe on Blue Sky?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Adam Sessler. That's the angry version of me. I'm also at Adam Sessler on Blue Sky. That's the really nice version of me.
That sounds good. All right. As always, thanks to our patrons who make this possible. Thanks to all our audience on YouTube, the people who are watching or listening to the show out on all the podcast services. You guys matter too. So thanks for everything. Thank you again, Adam. GameFace is up and out.